outrageous, absolutely outrageous. But lest you think of Travis as some greedy cretin from a century or two ago who doesn't believe in living wages for workers, he wants to set you straight. He would be perfectly okay with $12 an hour since he thinks that is a realistic living wage. Problem is, Dunkin' Donuts pays workers an average of $8.99 an hour. So in Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis's world, $4,889 an hour for the boss is just fine, while paying workers $15 an hour is somehow bad. He says it would prevent Dunkin' Donuts from hiring new workers. But Nigel could fix that problem himself. He could drop his pay to $150 an hour and use the rest to hire 315 more workers. In the Win Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence says, despite positive reviews for LeBron James's performance in the film Trainwreck, it's hard to beat Becky Hammonds' real-life performance.
James has gotten a lot of positive reviews, but when it comes to trying out a new profession and succeeding, it's hard to beat what Becky Hammon is doing. Hammon is a former WNBA player who now is a full-time assistant with the San Antonio Spurs. This summer, she made history. She was the first female to coach a team in the NBA's Las Vegas Summer League, and she's the first female coach to win it, as she guided the Spurs to a 6-1 record. In light of her success, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said he has, quote, no doubts, unquote, that one day a woman will be coaching an NBA team. Now, there's even talk that Hammon will be the one to break the NBA's glass ceiling. But everyone needs to remember that she's not even a lead assistant with the Spurs. Hammond sits in the second row, behind head coach Greg Popovich and his trio of top assistants. Also remember this, it's not easy to get one of the 30 NBA head coaching jobs. Just ask someone like Patrick Ewing, a former superstar with the New York Knicks and a longtime assistant who is still looking for his first head coaching gig. But it's certainly great to see that the NBA is already thinking about putting a woman in the ultimate position of power. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about after a fantastic weekend. Hope you had a great weekend as well. We were in Washington, D.C., and I always love going to Washington. Lots of great things to see, lots of great things to do. But this past weekend, the Badass Teachers Association had their big Congress this weekend, and a couple hundred teachers from across the country converged on the nation's capital to go to the halls of Congress and lobby. They shared with me some of their stories. They shared their stories of the classroom, shared their stories of their lobbying efforts. They're on Capitol Hill. Some interesting stuff, but not surprising. It's amazing how the profiteers have really gotten themselves in every facet of the decision-making process. And we're going to play some of those. We're going to play all of those interviews next week during the beginning of our People's Tour So that next Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Actually, all of next week will be Education Week. We'll be running the shows that we've done specifically around education, including this past weekend's interviews, which you will not want to miss, because it's almost back to school time. Got to get us thinking about education. Got to get us thinking at least, the kids are going back, what we need to be thinking about, what we need to be talking about. I got to tell you, in some of my conversations with folks, amazed at what teachers put up with, and really amazed that they've put up with it for so long. And the great thing about this group is they're like, you know what? We've got to get out and we've got to talk about why this stuff is important. We've got to get out and talk about and tell the stories, what happens in the classroom, tell the stories of what they do, not just for themselves, but for the entire profession. And they were very proud of themselves, as they should be, because the BAT group actually got inserted into a piece of legislation, an amendment that would help look into mental health problems around education. And, I was talking to a couple people who said, yeah, we know somebody, we know a couple people, who, they're on the edge. And what exactly that means, you take for yourself. But they say, the stress has now gotten so bad. This fixation on the tests has gotten so bad. And one of the folks I talked to me tweeted over today a story from New York City that evidently they've now decided to come out with it. Back in April, this woman who was a principal of this, what they say, this innovative school, this West Harlem public school, evidently she killed herself back in April, stepped out in front of a B train on the 135th Street station there, because the tests, the Common Core tests, the high stakes tests that her kids were given were being thrown out. So it's, all of this work that these kids did in taking these tests, all going to be thrown out. And, it's because what they're saying. Now, understand, these are third graders. And this is really, to me, the really important part of this. We've got so much stress, so much effort, so much of everything put into these high stake tests, that this principal felt that they're saying, and we don't know for sure, but they're saying that she had something to do with a cheating scandal, because her kids were struggling. And you could say, for all the good motive she may have had, whatever the rationale was, I got to tell you, I don't think it's the right direction. So she stepped off the platform in front of this train, and she's now dead because of this test. And you go, is it really worth it? Is it really something that we want to be pursuing? That we're now putting the educators? When I was a kid, it was the kids looking over cheating, going, oh, what's little Johnny or Susan next to me doing? Now the kids, they don't cheat. They don't need to cheat because the tests don't mean anything to them, really. It's now the teachers who are being tested and the pressures on them. It's really a very bizarre, twisted kind of a situation, because these tests are obviously being tied to teacher performance and, of course, their compensation and whether they're going to have a job. I can't tell you how many teachers I talked to over the weekend who were going like, look, the reality is these tests are designed to make the teaching profession disposable. Teachers are now just widgets that can be interchanged and thrown out. And now they're looking for the lowest wage. And that's it. In the conversations that I had, and as I look at this, what we're doing to public education, and we better save it quick, because it is being flushed right down the drain as we speak. What they're doing is they're creating an environment where there's no stability, where now it's up to the free market and the corporatists. And they're going to have that downward pressure on teachers to where if you can't work in a micromanaged environment, and if you dare to begin to even think outside the box of how to do things maybe a little differently, or help kids think a little bit differently, or pursue other interests, you're going to be moved on. And we talked to a teacher who had been fired a couple of times for doing just that, actually standing up and advocating for the kids in his school district and advocating for the teachers. And it's a whole world that really, even as someone who pays a lot of attention to this, a whole world that I didn't even know existed. So when you hear people say, "Well, they're all bad teachers and they're greedy," and which is why I think we're going to begin after we get back from the People's Tour. Why we're going to begin, I think, a weekly segment, a teacher's segment, where we talk, about policies. We talk about what it's like to be in the classroom, and maybe we start getting a perspective from their side of it. Maybe get the perspective of what it's like to actually be a teacher, and what it's like to know that the profession that you've put your whole life into, you're being attacked over. I look at this and I go, I would respond with anger because that's how I do things. These folks, not so much. They're more hurt than anything. And I look at these tests. I look at this whole path that we're taking. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for the teachers. It's not good for the administrators. It's not good for the parents. It's not good for the community. It's not good for society. It is good, however, for the profiteers. It is good for the people who are putting money in their pocket over this. And time again, story after story after story, you continually hear all of this. We need data. We need numbers. We need stuff so we can justify. That's what I thought the teacher's job was. I mean, honestly, we used to sweat out the tests, and it's one of those things that's just kind of curious to me that the kids don't cheat anymore because they don't need to, because, I'm going to fail the test anyway, because they've gotten that into their heads that, these tests are, I'm not going to be held responsible for it tomorrow. They forget about them in a couple of weeks. And then the numbers come back. Oh, you all failed. The whole school failed. School's a failure. It's the administrators then that start feeling the heat, and then they come down on the teachers. And the teachers, they can't beat up anybody. They're at the bottom of the hill. And it's one of those things, it rolls downhill, So I think when we get back, because, we're going to be starting off the People's Tour for America. We're going to be starting off in Raleigh, North Carolina, and talking to folks across the entire southern U.S. about the civil rights movement and labor's involvement in it, which I think is an excellent educational opportunity for all of us, especially now with all of the awareness and all of the organizing going around with the Black Lives Matter campaign and that movement of people saying, hey, you know what? Things haven't changed an awful lot. And for me, I always go back to, it's the economics, stupid. It's the jobs, it's the wealth, it's the communities that have been basically defunded and allowed to crumble. And at some point, that's got to be the focus in my view. And I think Bernie Sanders is right on it. We'll talk a little bit later about that, about his statements on inequality and his statements on race, basically shooting down the detractors, if you will. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your comments. Again, getting some good reports back on the trip, the People's Tour for America. If you want to weigh in, hey, what would be a good thing to focus on while we're down in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, North Carolina, South Carolina, while we're all through those states. If you've got something, hey, I know this, let us know. I'd love to know. Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Also, if there's something on the education front that you want to hear about, let us know as well. And I would appreciate it. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Stick around. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. That was the day labor leader William Silvis died. Silvis was born in Armbaugh, Pennsylvania. He learned the trade of wagon making from his father, but soon he left home to take up an apprenticeship as an iron worker. He found work in Philadelphia. At the time, there was an increasing practice of iron molders to hire unskilled workers as helpers for the skilled craftsmen. This led to skilled workers seeing their wages cut. Silvis joined a strike against the wage erosion led by the Journeyman Stove and Hollowware Molders Union. Soon, he was elected secretary of the union. But Silvis understood that to truly have power, the iron molders would need to organize beyond Philadelphia. And so in 1859, 12 molders from various unions met in Philadelphia to plan to join together. The Civil War put those plans on hold. During the war, as men went to fight, many workers saw their wages increase due to the labor shortage. But prices at the stores rose even more quickly, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for labor to organize, in 1863, Silvis helped found the Iron Molders International Union. He became the first president of the new union. 21 locals joined under the Iron Molders International Union, and it grew to include 8,000 workers. But Silvis had a bigger vision for the labor movement. He thought all skilled trades should band together to improve wages and working conditions. So in 1866, he founded the National Labor Union. The National Labor Union quickly grew to 30,000 workers. But Silvis died in 1869, cutting short his efforts to grow a national union. The union continued until 1873, when it dissolved. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Leanne Naramore. On Fox News' America's Newsroom, correspondent Dan Springer misleadingly reported on the unintended consequences of Seattle raising the minimum wage.
The minimum wage here in Seattle went to $11 an hour in April, on its way to $15 an hour by 2018. Some people have figured out that with the pay raise, they'll make too much money to stay on certain welfare programs.
Springer went on to claim that increased wages are also increasing prices at restaurants. Despite Fox News' latest attempts to attack and shame the poor, neither of these claims are true. The argument that government assistance and benefits are too generous and thus drive recipients out of work has been thoroughly debunked by experts for years. In addition, a recent report by Common Dreams showed that several of the most outspoken local opponents of Seattle's minimum wage increase have actually opened new restaurants and increased staff hiring since the ordinance went into effect. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous. The salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
He's going the distance. He's going for speed. She's all alone in a time of need. Because he's racing and plotting the course. He's fighting and fighting and riding on his horse. He's racing and racing.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So the big news that I saw over the weekend, the news that came out, 439 Pennsylvanians signed up for the Medicaid expansion. And this is one of those things you go, thank goodness no more Tom Corbett. Because, you look at what that could have been, and this idea to by the new governor to scrap that and move along seems to me to be a good thing, which is why I have asked Antoinette Krause. She is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Healthcare Access Network to come talk with us. Antoinette, thanks so much for taking time for us.
It's great to be here.
So I look at this. This is a good thing, right?
Yeah, no, it's excellent news. 439,000 folks. Since December, that's a lot of individuals. I think it really shows that there's a pent-up demand for health insurance coverage in Pennsylvania.
So I look at this, and over the weekend, I don't know if you saw on Sunday, the Republicans actually shot down another attempt in the Senate to repeal Obamacare. It got pushed back on a rare Sunday vote. I've been looking at this going, I think the Republicans have got to start walking away from this because a lot of their voters are going, hey, I can get health care.
Yeah, the politics of this, it's really time to put it to rest. We're seeing hundreds of thousands of folks getting coverage through Medicaid expansion or Obamacare. And, it's everyday working people, Democrats, Republicans, independents. It's really not a political issue anymore.
Well, at least I hope not. At some point we have to, I think at some point we have to recognize that we're all in this together and that healthcare should be one of those things that is a right, not something that just because you can afford it, you get it. It should be something that as a citizen of this country, you should be able to if you're sick, go see a doctor.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we're seeing hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians sign up for health care. These are the same folks that under the Corbett administration lost their health care when he ended adult basic.
Right. So, this is a huge number. 439,000 seems like a big number. As I remember that there's still an awful lot more out there, right?
Yeah. So there's estimated about 600,000 individuals in Pennsylvania who are eligible. A lot of the folks that are left are vulnerable populations or folks in rural areas or hard to reach communities. So we have a lot of work to get done to let people know that this program exists.
So in looking at this, I look at the numbers and I'm going, wow, that there was a whole bunch of need that was out there that's not being serviced. There are some who would say, well, now that all these people have health insurance, where are they going to go to get health care? Because we don't really have the infrastructure. So I've been told.
Yeah, so I think it's something we need to look at. I think because people have coverage doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be able to get the access that they need. But I think, this is a very important first step. And it's a step to reducing healthcare costs and making sure that, people don't die because they don't have health insurance.
And what are to get into this Medicaid expansion, what are the parameters?
Yeah, so to be eligible for Medicaid expansion, you have to be someone who makes, under $16,000 a year. So we're talking about folks that are working low-wage jobs. A lot of them, their employers don't offer health insurance coverage.
So let me ask you this then. So let's say that, because we've heard this attack on the minimum wage increase from a variety of different directions. But one of them is that, well, people don't want to make more money because then they'll make more than $16,000 a year and maybe not get the health care coverage that the Medicaid expansion would provide. Do you see that? Do you hear of that? Do you any evidence of that in your world?
Absolutely not. I think what's become clear with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, healthcare no longer has to be tied to, if your employer offers you health insurance coverage. So say next year I make more than $16,000, I'll be eligible for financial assistance on the health insurance marketplace, to make health insurance affordable. So if I make more, there's other assistance available to me. And, if my hours are cut or I see a reduction in my wages, I might be eligible for Medicaid expansion. So these programs really allow people to have the protection and security and peace of mind that comes to being able to access health insurance coverage no matter where you're working.
And I would argue it actually gives people the ability to stop working if they so wanted to. I look at the YouTube phenom Billy Joe Bob Webb, the guy, I think he's from Tennessee, big right-wing phenom on the YouTube's talking about guns and how much he doesn't like guns, how much he loves guns and hates queers, but loves his Obamacare because if they repealed it, then he would have to go back to work.
Yeah, and we've seen, small business owners, we've seen stories of folks who, wanted to start that small business but couldn't because they were worried they wouldn't be able to get health insurance covered. So now folks can go out, start that small business they always wanted to, or be that entrepreneur and not worry about where they'll get their health insurance.
Let me ask you about some of the other attacks I've heard, because we're seeing a lot of consolidation going on. We're seeing the behemoths becoming even bigger. Are we going to expect to see larger networks? Are we? Because there's some who are saying the only way that these hospitals can compete is if they monopolize. Are we seeing really the monopolization of the health care part of it to keep up with the health insurance part of it?
I mean, we've seen this happening for years, and, folks right now are looking for other ways to, blame things that are happening on Obamacare, and this is not true. It's been happening. I think in terms of the health insurance industry, we're seeing more competition, more plans offered, and it'll take a few years to see how this all plays out, but, costs are going down, folks are getting covered, and people are going to be able to be healthier.
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine just said his doctor gave up his practice, and the excuse that the guy gave me, the doctor said, well, I'm going to work for one of these big healthcare groups because Obamacare is destroying the single family practitioner and the single doctor. And I go, I find that kind of difficult to believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely not true. I mean, what we're seeing is that, more people have health insurance, so there's a higher demand for doctors, and, we need more doctors in small rural communities. So it's actually increasing the need for more primary care doctors and nurse practitioners and specialists.
See, that's one of those things that I think policy could also help address. We could maybe pay for people to go to medical school if they'll agree to go into the rural area communities and practice for several years, or maybe even they might decide to like it and stay.
And that's an excellent point. And actually, under Obamacare, there are now student loan forgiveness programs for doctors that go practice in underserved communities, as well as bonus payments for physicians that go into primary care in rural and underserved communities. So, and I think we're looking at all of those options.
Wow, it sounds like somebody's actually thinking that way. That's interesting because we don't hear that in the mainstream corporate-controlled media.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that doesn't, advance political partisan debate, so we tend not to talk about it as much.
So you guys there at the Pennsylvania Healthcare Access Network, your kind of job is getting folks the information that they need, help pairing them with folks. So I would have to maybe argue that part of this 439,000 signing up for the expansion has something a little bit to do with you guys, right?
Thanks. Yeah, we've been out educating folks in the community. So far, we've actually signed up 3,000 individuals in the new Medicaid program since December. So we're pretty proud that we've been out kind of pounding the pavement, reaching folks in their communities.
And their website, pahealthaccess.org. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Antoinette Krause's name. It'll take you right there. She is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Healthcare Access Network. But, in looking at this, I mean, there's still the need out there. There's still more work to be done. What kind of stories are you hearing from people on the ground as they're getting this? And some people probably for the very, very first time having that health insurance. What are you hearing from folks?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen folks that haven't had health insurance for years finally be able to get coverage. We've seen a lot of folks that were on adult basic that Governor Corbett ended that are now finally, again, for the first time in, 2 years, able to go back and see their doctor because they get health care coverage.
So let me ask you the other question in this, because now we've got a new governor who a lot of folks are giving credit for this number and for this direction. How much of this is the difference between what former Governor Corbett had proposed with his euphemistically named Healthy PA plan and the new governor's plan?
So, I think the other number that we haven't talked about is that there's been 150,000 individuals that have enrolled since Governor Wolf switched from Healthy PA. So that's 150,000 people in just a few months. So if you look at it, we removed a lot of the red tape and barriers. So folks are able to get through, they're not denied, and they're not, getting stuck with red tape all across the application process.
And are there any other parts any differences? Because, I was trying to go through and figure out, what's the difference between the former governor's plan and the new governor's idea. And I remember, there were the former governor wanted co-pays and all kind of obstacles and all kinds of stuff to go along with it. How did that transition into the new governor's administration?
Yeah, I mean, so what the old plan does, it was divided people based on their health needs in the various plans. You would have to fill out a lengthy medical needs assessment to figure out if you could get the higher benefits package. Starting next year, you would have had, to pay monthly premiums if you were over a certain income range. And, what Governor Wolf did was say, we're not going to go through all that. We're just going to make one streamlined benefit package that everyone will be able to get. And the application process will be based on income. And that's what you need to do to apply. And that's what you need to get covered. And that's how it's playing out at this moment. So
last question I've got for you. Let's say someone at this juncture still doesn't have health care. And they fall into, what is it? I think 138% of poverty.
Yeah. or less than 16,000. People don't know what 138% of poverty is outside of the policy world.
So that's the hard number of 16,000. So if you're under that, you would be eligible to jump into this Medicaid expansion to get health care coverage, right?
Yeah, so folks should definitely, they can give us a call. Our phone number is 877-570-3642. If you think you might be eligible, if you think you're not eligible, you just don't know, you should definitely call us or go to our website, pahealthaccess.org, and we'll help figure out, what you're eligible for. And even if you think you're not eligible, we saw a lot of people who thought that they couldn't get covered because under the Corbett administration, we didn't expand Medicaid for a period of time. I mean, you should definitely come back and figure out what you're eligible for.
At least take a look at it. Antoinette, I appreciate you taking a little time for us, filling us in on a little bit of the details. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Always great to be here.
Great talking with you, Antoinette Krause. Again, PAHealthAccess.org, the website. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Antoinette's name. Take you right there. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
There's a Vietnam vet with a cardboard sign sitting there by the left turn line. A flag on his wheelchair flapping in the breeze. One leg missing and both hands free. No one's paying much mind to him. The VA budget's just stretched so thin, and there's more coming back from the Mideast war. We can't make it here anymore.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great, big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates. And in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure. I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that, yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier.
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change and the mega drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis. It created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know. I guess when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report. So I guess they just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
When it's time to change, then it's time to change. Don't fight the tide, come along for the ride, don't you see? When it's time to change.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
What the hell we fighting for? Just surrender and it won't hurt at all. Just got time to say your prayer while you're waiting for the hammer to fall.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So good news on the healthcare front. And I love it. You know, I've talked about this before. You find that guy, the Jimmy Joe Bob Webb there, the YouTube phenom. And I can't tell you how many folks like that I've met who, you know, the big conservatives, and they were on the trash Obama wagon, trash the Obamacare train, you know, love their guns, hate the queers, but now have kind of come around to, you know, Obamacare is not so bad because I can see how it helps me, which is what the Michelle Bachmans and the rest of the cavalcade of crazy on the right wing were trying to avoid. They knew what this would lead to. They actually did. They knew that this was going to be trouble for them because once people got it in their hands, you can't take it away. And they learned that from Social Security. They learned that from Medicare, and they're learning it again on the Obamacare front. So I find that very, very interesting. Anyway, had a great weekend. I come back over the weekend, and my producer, Sean, is almost pulling what little Harry's got out. I mean, he's just one of these things. Can you believe this? And I go, this is something we absolutely have to get to because it falls right into the line with this whole thing. You've got these right-wingers who it helps them, it affects them, it's good for them, but everybody else is no good. They all stink. So how was your weekend there, Sean?
Pretty good. You know, I went home for a cookout. My birthday is coming up this Friday. And so my parents held a family cookout with some friends and family, and I was home over the weekend. So get to the point during the middle of the afternoon. I'm like 3 or 4 beers in, and we start talking about Obama. Somehow Obama comes up in the conversation, and
doesn't it always?
It always comes up. And I'm at the point now where I'm around people. I just don't debate politics because my brother's this business conservative. His girlfriend's a business conservative. My mom's your middle of the road Democrat, working class, white working class. She's in a union. My dad was in a union as a Teamster. And my mom's friend and her son, my best friend, are your Republicans who are just Republican, but they are not involved with the echo chamber. But somehow stuff like this country's going to hell in a handbasket always comes out. And you sit back and you're like, well, I wonder what they're talking about. They're talking about Obama. And then the person was, well, Obama's always on vacation. Every time you turn around, there he is on vacation. And I was like, well, George Bush spent, 3 of 8 years on vacation at the ranch?
At least. But here's the thing. I would have rather he spent all 8 years on vacation.
Yeah. And that's when my mom starts looking at me and tells me to shut up. But the thing that gets me the most is my mom's friend and my friend, they were both laid off their jobs recently, and they exhausted their unemployment insurance up until the very end. And my mom's friend has been unemployed for about 7 months now.
Wow.
And she hasn't started to look for a job.
Are there extensions yet? I mean, can she still get an extension?
I don't know, but it's coming up to that deadline, that first deadline, I guess.
The 26 weeks.
Yeah. And
so she's collecting it because she can't find a job.
Yeah, but this country's going to hell in a handbasket.
The question is, can she find a job and not looking? Is she just sucking on the government teat? What is it?
Well, I think it's the second one. She just hasn't started looking at a job. And
Okay.
she's been using this as sort of like a paid vacation.
Okay. So basically she's the people that the Republicans are talking about.
Right.
Their constituents.
Right.
All right. Okay. I think I'm
And so,
because that takes me, I think of the Tea Party people that I met in 2010 who had been unemployed from the Bush recession all the way up until 2010 when all of the Tea Party stuff was going on. And they were on extension after, I think it was like 99 weeks of extensions.
And what made this best, she was mid-level management for the banks. First, she worked for, Philadelphia First National Bank. That became Wachovia. That were core states, and then it got eaten up by Wachovia, and that got eaten up by Wells Fargo, and then she got laid off from Wells Fargo and got
That's
a job.
even better, yes.
So she got a job at Citizens Bank, and she got laid. She was working for Citizens Bank for 3 years. She got laid off there. Then she was working at Susquehanna Bank, which is a mid-region bank,
right?
And she just got laid off there doing government banking. So her clients were like school districts, municipalities, and stuff like that. And she was a mid-level manager working there.
It's the teacher's fault then. It's the teacher's fault she got
And
laid
so
off.
I didn't want to drop that nuclear bomb saying, well, you're a Republican here, and you're the one that's sucking on unemployment and hasn't started looking for a job at 58 years old. I didn't want to, I was really close of dropping that bomb.
Yeah.
But then we go into another conversation saying, well, taxes come up. So what did they bring up? Well, those rich people shouldn't be getting punished for the taxes. We shouldn't be punishing them. And this,
okay. Who should we be getting taxes from?
The middle class and the poor people.
Oh,
That we should be taxing them more. And that was my argument. She's like, well, they're already taxed enough. And I tried to explain to them the whole tax bracket thing. And that was just boom, just out of the window.
That's like speaking Chinese. to
Yeah,
most
I
people.
might as well just been using a slide rule there at that point because it was just trying to explain that was bad. But then my mom chimes in and she's like, well, people like Bill Gates, Bono, and others, they signed this pact, like that Grover Norquist thing, no taxes pledge. They signed this pledge where they give X amount of $1 billion away. And don't you think that's a great idea?
No, it wasn't Grover Norquist. Grover Norquist is the no tax.
It's like that.
increase.
It's that type of pledge where you pledge to give billions of dollars
I
away.
think that
for
was
this-
the Buffett and Gates pledge.
Yeah, there we go.
Where
That
the
one.
billionaire class was going to give away half of their wealth, which they were going to do anyway, just to avoid paying taxes on it.
Yeah, and then I said, well, you're subsidizing that as a taxpayer.
Sure.
And they looked at me like I had 3 heads growing on my shoulder. And at this point, I'm on 4 or 5 beers, and it's just turning into a pie fight. We're just throwing at each other, yelling, and then some of my brothers like, well, unions suck, this, that, and the other. And you're the person that just looks at looks at everyone with these rosy framed glasses on, trying to see the best in everyone. And my brother's looking at me like I made it on my own in the past recession.
Whoa, stop with the rosy glasses for a second, because with the rosy glasses analogy is perfect, because what they're saying is the billionaires will take care of us through their philanthropy. To me, that's just obnoxiously rosy glass Wow.
Well, I spent 3 years, a year and a half working in a beer distributor, driving a forklift, unloading, doing physical labor. And I've been doing that type of work every single summer before I got out of college since I was 16.
Yeah.
So high school, I spent a semester washing dishes every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights from 6 to 10, just so I can have food to eat that week in college. So, I don't think I'm trying to look through that rosy frame glasses type of thing.
You just want something for nothing is what you want.
Yeah, I know. I'm just a working peon.
You're just lazy.
My brother, who spent 3 years living on the couch, quit his job as a public school teacher, high school teacher in New York State, came back home, started his photography business. And then he said, I made it on my own during one of the worst recessions since the Great Depression. We should be the people like me should be the ones getting the breaks and everything, because we're out there like job creators, like that type of argument. And this is when he was living on the couch for 3 years. I guess he got like a government loan or a bank loan, to start his own business.
Okay, which I'm all in favor of.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
But he was saying he did it on his own.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got that Horatio Alger, mindset that I out of my intestinal fortitude and what excrement came out, I whittled myself some bootstraps and then I pulled myself up with them. We hear this a lot. When the reality is the bank was insured. If he failed, he'd file bankruptcy. We would pick up the costs. I'm certain, mom and dad kicked in a bunch of money, had an opportunity there. I love those folks who say, I did it all myself. And I could do that too. I'm quite easily, I could say that same thing. It's not true, but I could say it if I wanted.
And then my brother, who is a photographer, architectural photographer, which, hey, there's not that many out there, and he does really good work. Some of his clients get money as contractors from the government.
Of course they do.
So he is like, he gets the contract.
Hate the government, except when they're giving me a
money.
job.
He gets the government contractors money. He's like the
Nice.
third person down in line. Like they divvy it up to him. That's some of his contractors. He had a couple jobs where he actually had people had to follow him around in like this, like Dunlop or like a military contractor type of thing.
Right.
He was doing like shooting the computer servers and stuff like that. And he had to have a military contract or an actual security guard.
Yeah, to make
armed
sure he
security
wasn't
guard
taking
north of
pictures
Grumman, like
secrets.
that type of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, what's kind of interesting about that though, and you hit on, it made me think of something there when you said he's like third or fourth down the line. It's amazing how when we contract something out, we never really contract it out to the person who actually does the job. How does he feel about being cheated? Because the contract probably went for, let's say, $1,000, and they contracted it out to a contractor for $800, and they contracted it out to a contractor for $600, and they contracted it out to a contractor for $400, who probably actually did the work for $350.
Well, no, my brother does everything by himself, and
no, I mean that's what happens in this game. The people who have the government contracts, they've done subcontracted out and down and down and down, and of course, everybody along the way takes their bite of it. So when your brother's doing the work, he's probably only getting about half, if half.
no, he's getting the market rate of what photographers offer.
You're missing the point.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The point is we probably paid let's say $1,000 for a photograph. That's completely outrageous. It's completely well out of the bounds. But the person who had that original contract got it for $1,000. By the time it got down to your brother who actually did the work, everybody along that chain had to take their piece of it.
Oh yeah,
they all got a cut. And then you get whatever the market rate is. That's what he ended up getting.
Yep. And my brother's in I would say fairly middle class. He's not like making $100,000 a year. And what he also does is to get contracts in New York City. He owns a PO box in Brooklyn.
Nothing wrong with that. Everybody does. All the minor entrepreneurs do it.
Yeah, and so like that type of stuff. And that was just my weekend, and this was just like a 45-minute to an hour part of the weekend. I wanted to pull my hair out the point because of all the things. I'm just like, you people are the ones who are getting screwed over the most, and you're sitting here defending the people screwing you over.
But you know what the really sad part about it is it ruined your weekend.
my supposed like little birthday party.
Those 3 or 4 little beer buzz you had going on was just completely ruined because of that. Because of the adrenaline I can feel from you now. And you know what? Even if they lost the argument, they won.
Yeah.
The terrorists have won.
And I am the only progressive liberal in my family. And it's just like I was outnumbered like 6-1.
Wow.
With my mom sitting off to the side, like not getting engaged in the things. It's like, and I was just like looking for someone to throw me a lifeline here.
Somebody throw me a bone. Throw me another
But no
beer
one was
at
doing
least.
it. I was just like, I had to come in from all different ways. And it was just like, it's what I had to deal with for like an hour or two on Saturday afternoon.
Wow.
While Cole Hamels from the Phillies was pitching a no-hitter during his last game in the Phillies uniform that I missed.
Wow.
So on top of that, I missed the 13th no-hitter in Phillies history.
And I'm sure a lot of people did. So there you go. Well, good. I'm glad to hear you had a good weekend. I look forward to next weekend's tales as well. Tales from the barbecue, if you will. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Together we will live on forevermore. In this land we have defended from all things dark and cruel. Now we are defenseless.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
By a 1-vote margin, the U.S. Senate passed fast-track authority to expedite passage of the disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, which will export beaucoup more of our country's middle-class jobs. That's the kind of pro-corporate stupidity the Republican Congress specializes in these days. But wait, the key votes for the fast track came from a baker's dozen of Senate Democrats. Fast track is a railroad job to enthrone global corporate power over us. It will allow the Obama administration to send the massive 12-country trade scam to Congress for an up or down vote with little debate and no amendments allowed. Details of this thing are being negotiated in strict secrecy between top government officials and top executives of some 500 global corporations. Workers, consumers, and all the rest of us are shut out. The majority of Americans oppose this giveaway, so what's with the 13 turncoat Democrats? Not to worry, they say, trade benefits everyone. Do they think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Americans know that these trade schemes make the super rich richer, while the incomes of practically everyone else go south. There's still a chance to defeat the TPP because a gritty, well-organized populist coalition is rallying grassroots opposition to reject this raw deal. To join the fight, go to citizen.org/trade. This is Jim Hightower saying, and don't forget the 13 Democratic sellouts. If any one of them had stood with the people on the fast-track vote, we would have already derailed TPP. The 13 senators who said nuts to you are Michael Bennet, Maria Cantwell, Tom Carper, Chris Coons, Dianne Feinstein, Heidi Heitkamp, Tim Kaine, Claire McCaskill, Patty Murray, Bill Nelson, Jean Shaheen, Mark Warner, and Ron Wyden.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Keeping the chambers of commerce within their gated communities. The Rick Smith Show.
It was an inside job by the well-connected. Your little protest, so merrily rejected. It was an inside job, like it always is. Chalk it up to business as usual.
Yeah, I go back and I love that argument that, you know, the wealthy class, they're going to take care of us. Yeah, they're taking care of us all right. I look at this article I saw over the weekend over at The Guardian. And it's one of those things where you go, yeah, I wish we had a media outlet like The Guardian that actually points out real, actual news and doesn't pander to the billionaire class. But they write in their July 21st story The world's super rich have taken advantage of lax tax rules to siphon off at least $21 trillion and possibly as much as $32 trillion from their home countries and have hidden it abroad, a sum larger than the entire U.S. economy. And they go through and they look at all these different tax dodges that have popped up that the wealth class has lobbied heavily for. And, basically doing what I've been saying for the longest time, this massive redistribution of wealth. And we've seen this time and time again as, tax breaks for big business that doesn't affect small business and mom and pop, actually to their detriment, which is why I'm confused at how it is you hear these quote unquote business conservatives talking about we love small business, but all of the benefit seems to go to the big ones. But I guess it's just one of those crazy moments. But you look at our infrastructure, you look at our education, you look at all of these things that everyone says is crumbling. And to take, Sean's mother's friend's comment into some bit of context, this idea that we're going to hell in a handbag, which has been around for generations. We all want to think everything's doom and gloom and things are tough in my world, so it sucks everywhere and everything's going to collapse because there's all those politicians. Think about globally, $32 trillion being redistributed to the people who actually earn the money. And the kind of economic motivator and generator that would be. What kind of engine would that be? And, I've been saying for years, you go back to the Reagan years and you undo the horrible policies of Ronald Wilson Reagan, and you continue down a path where you have a growing broad middle class. What do we look like today? Because what we've done is we've created a billionaire class. And I've said this for a long time. We should all have our own favorite billionaires because we created them. It's our wealth that they have taken, that they have put into their own pockets and stored in these offshore tax havens and their little magic boxes in Delaware or South Dakota. We've given this to them. And we've given it to them through lower wages. We've given it to them through lower opportunities for our kids because of school funding as not kept up with inflation or need. And man, look at our infrastructure. I was coming out of DC. I was doing heading 495 north, and there's a big sign, careful, rumble strips. And I'm like, the heck with the rumble strips. Throw the rumble strips out there. Do something with these damn potholes. It was like an explosion at every, I got thrown around just going around the curve because it was so bad. I didn't even feel the rumble strips, to be honest with you. And we just haven't invested in our infrastructure. We haven't invested in the nation. I was in Washington trying to get a cell phone signal in the hotel. Yeah, good luck on that one. We were in Chicago not too long ago. Try to get a Wi-Fi connection out there. I can't wait to see what happens when we do this Southern Civil Rights Tour, what kind of internet connectivity we're going to have across the South. I'll bet it's probably the best ever because we seem to be spending a lot of money down there at the expense of probably the rest of the nation. But I don't know. We'll find out. To me, with all of the resource that we've given to the wealth class that they've used overseas, you kind of go, we've done this to ourselves because we're dumb. I mean, that's the only explanation I can come up with. We're dumb. And we're not paying attention. We're just too tip of the nose looking at someone who may be getting something that we're not, going, no, not them. It's kind of insane if you think about it. It really, really kind of insane. And on a huge level, very frustrating. I mean, we have created these behemoths out of our opportunities, or as I used to like to say, they've been created out of the tears of broken dreams of the working class of this country. And that's what it is. Quick break, right back. Stick around.
People are just about due. I'm a massive airstrike on a beautiful night. Yeah, it's my song I'm singing. Somebody better start counting. We're coming out swinging.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The UAW is having a busy summer. In addition to bargaining a new auto contract at GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, the union has also just opened bargaining for 17,000 Michigan state workers. The UAW's Ed Mitchell says the UAW, the largest Michigan state employee union, wants Michigan to prosper and for UAW members to share in the value of the hard work it takes to keep the state running efficiently. What's outrageous? Apparently living wages. Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis, who gets approximately $4,889 an hour, says that $15 an hour for low-wage food industry workers in New York is outrageous, absolutely outrageous. But lest you think of Travis as some greedy cretin from a century or two ago who doesn't believe in living wages for workers, he wants to set you straight. He would be perfectly okay with $12 an hour since he thinks that is a realistic living wage. Problem is, Dunkin' Donuts pays workers an average of $8.99 an hour. So in Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis's world, $4,889 an hour for the boss is just fine, while paying workers $15 an hour is somehow bad. He says it would prevent Dunkin' Donuts from hiring new workers. But Nigel could fix that problem himself. He could drop his pay to $150 an hour and use the rest to hire 315 more workers. In the WIN Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence says, despite positive reviews for LeBron James's performance in the film Trainwreck, it's hard to beat Becky Hammons' real-life performance.
James has gotten a lot of positive reviews, but when it comes to trying out a new profession and succeeding, it's hard to beat what Becky Hammon is doing. Hammon is a former WNBA player who now is a full-time assistant with the San Antonio Spurs. This summer, she made history. She was the first female to coach a team in the NBA's Las Vegas Summer League, and she's the first female coach to win it, as she guided the Spurs to a 6-1 record. In light of her success, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said he has, quote, no doubts, unquote, that one day a woman will be coaching an NBA team. Now, there's even talk that Hammon will be the one to break the NBA's glass ceiling. But everyone needs to remember that she's not even a lead assistant with the Spurs. Hammon sits in the second row, behind head coach Greg Popovich and his trio of top assistants. Also remember this, it's not easy to get one of the 30 NBA head coaching jobs. Just ask someone like Patrick Ewing, a former superstar with the New York Knicks and a longtime assistant who is still looking for his first head coaching gig. But it's certainly great to see that the NBA is already thinking about putting a woman in the ultimate position of power. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Minimum wage.
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Not only do they want to pay you less, they want the government to pick up the difference. And I love that frame of mind. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Love the frame of mind that there are people out there who, you know, they could get a raise if they really wanted to. They could make more money if they really wanted to, but they don't because they're happy sucking off the government teat. They're dependent on the taxpayer. And I go, no. The workers aren't the one who are dependent on it. It's the industry that's dependent on the subsidies that come from we the people to prop up their low-wage workforce. I got to tell you, I've been saying for years what has to happen. You need to unionize all of those people and then sit down at the table and say, okay, what are the profits? We'd like some of the profits that we create. But our mainstream corporate-controlled media, not so thrilled with the idea of increasing the minimum wage, and some of the messaging out of it, well, just plain silly at a certain point. And I would argue the other side of it, almost criminal, which is why we've asked Craig Harrington. He is the economic researcher over at Media Matters for America. Going to talk a little bit about the coverage by our mainstream media friends on the minimum wage issue. Craig, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me again.
So, I hear this, and I'm sure you've heard it too, that, there are people who, they could make $1 or $2 or $5. They could make more money if they wanted to, but there's this welfare cliff that they would fall off the cliff and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in benefits, which on a certain level is insane, and I guess on another level comical.
Yeah, this welfare cliff argument
which, it's been around since the early 1990s. The Cato Institute was the first organization that put together this welfare cliff research, and it became much more popular in 2012 when the Pennsylvania Secretary of State started pushing the idea that some people in Pennsylvania could make more money not working and receiving government benefits than they could working. And it's something that we've seen get a little bit more pickup in right-wing media in the last few weeks. Over at Media Matters, I've written 2 blogs in the last 4 weeks correcting multiple instances of claims that people are actually passing up increased wages so that they can stay on welfare benefits. And then last week, on July 22nd, there was this story out of Seattle by Fox correspondent Dan Springer, who was claiming that by increasing the minimum wage in Seattle, some low-wage residents of the city were actually asking for fewer hours from their employers so that they could stay in poverty, stay on assistance programs, stay on SNAP, stay on WIC, stay on TANF, and continue receiving housing subsidies from the government. Because if they got this raise to $11 an hour, which is what the Seattle minimum wage is currently, they would be above the income threshold and wouldn't qualify anymore. This is the kind of nefarious thing that you get out of the conservative media all the time. And the best part of this was they didn't even find one person that they could point to. It wasn't like Jason Greenslate, the food stamp surfer that became famous in 2013. Their source of their proof that some people in Seattle
it's anecdotal.
refuse wages was actually a radio host. It was,
Was he the one that was he the one who was making poverty wages? Because there's not a lot of money in this industry, Craig.
Yeah, he was just claiming to have known people that did it. He thought, oh, it's logical. If you get a raise and you lose those benefits, why would you want the raise? You'd rather have the benefits.
And that's the thing, though, Craig. I mean, these arguments they sound plausible. You start going, well, hold on. If I make an extra $1 or $2 and I get over that threshold, then I lose all of these other benefits. No school lunch programs, no LIHEAP, no rent assistance, none of this stuff. And it sounds logical because I think most of us would go, well, just from a pure economic standpoint, why would you do it?
And of course, no one denies that maybe 1 or 2 people might do this. But if that was their circumstance, you have to think about how many hours were they working before the minimum wage went up. Imagine that you're a mom or you're a single parent and you have kids to support and you're working more than 40 hours a week. The minimum wage goes up a little bit. And now you're making a little bit over the threshold, but you've already been working more than full time. People might be reducing their hours to, full-time hours or part-time hours so that they can spend more time with their families. This is something called job lock, which first sort of sprung into the public consciousness with the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, by providing, by expanding subsidies and providing extra subsidies for people at higher levels of still relatively low income, it reduces something called job lock, and it freed up 2 million work hours or something like that in the economy, that people who would otherwise be working more than full time were reducing their hours, spending more time with their family, spending more time in school, spending more time in leisure activities, being normal people and not just working constantly. So even if it was possible that one person asked for fewer hours so they could stay on benefits in Seattle, that person was probably working well over full time anyway and is now spending a little bit more time with their kids.
And isn't that something that we would actually want?
Right. That's something that, the Family Values Society, the Family Values police in the conservative media, that's something they ought to be pushing. Spending more time with your family, making a little bit more on the side so that you can have a stable home life. That's something the conservatives claim they care about. But then maybe you do find one person in Seattle who fits that description. Of course, Fox News is attacking that person because they're saying, well, this was supposed to reduce reliance on benefits and lift people out of poverty. But the fact is, there are always going to be people who are existing in poverty when you have a minimum wage that's below a poverty level. And that's where the minimum wage still is nationwide. And it's near a poverty level in Seattle, even after being increased. And until people start taking home more wages, there are always going to be people who work full time and still struggle. Yep. And that's just the way the economy works until we make it more fair.
And when, as you're talking, I'm thinking about this woman. I think her name was Maria Fernandez. She was found dead behind a Wawa in Philadelphia. And they found out that this woman was like working 60, 70 hours a week for Dunkin' Donuts. But the fact she was working for 3 different franchise owners, like 20 hours here, 25 hours here, 30 hours there, that never added up to more than 40 hours at any place. So she couldn't get any overtime, but she was working like a dog. And, she wanted to take a nap in the back in the car and died of asphyxiation. You look at these situations, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people like her out there who, one tragedy away from who knows.
Yeah, and the Maria Fernandez thing, that happened last August, I believe. It was August, like late August 2014 when that was in the news. And this is a person who was working, 80 hours a week. But yeah, died tragically of carbon monoxide poisoning when she was trying to take a cat nap between nearly full-time shifts. This is a common thing. It's something that low-wage people deal with all the time. In order to make ends meet, you have to work yourself like a dog, work yourself to the point of exhaustion. And then, of course, like, God forbid you take advantage of one small thing here. Maybe you cut a corner with a program there. The right-wing media, the millionaires who work for Fox News, are going to come out in masse against you, which is just what we see all the time. It was only about a week ago, Bill O'Reilly had a segment, a horrifying segment, a dehumanizing segment on his show, where he went out and did man-on-the-street interviews with homeless people in New York City and portrayed them in the worst possible way imaginable. He sent out Jesse Waters, that guy who goes and harasses people.
Right.
And it was just this dehumanizing segment showing poor people like they were all vagrants and that they were all sort of unstable, that they were all somehow deficient as people. And that's the kind of thing you get from Fox News all the time. And then Bill O'Reilly, I don't know, flies home in his private helicopter making $25 million a year.
Wow. The sad thing is a lot of our homeless population are struggling with mental health issues. And I would argue, again, that's another one of those, here in Pennsylvania, anyway, in my view, when we privatized and closed down a lot of the state hospitals and just threw people out into the streets, and a lot of them ended up in jail and a lot more ended up on our streets. And I would argue there are a lot of people who need help that we've just kind of thrown away like trash. That's really sad.
Yeah, and then it's something, there are institutional decisions, there are policy decisions that you can make to help alleviate some of the suffering that is associated with poverty. There are things that you can do. There are government programs you can establish, and there's a reason that we have these programs that support people who, when they're earning minimum wage, maybe working full time, still are living in poverty. There's a reason we have these social institutions there, and there's also a reason that conservatives, media and conservative political circles are aligned against them, because they just hate that role for government. They don't believe that the government should have its hand in sort of alleviating the suffering of the poor, when it could be focusing on providing more business incentives for the already wealthy and already well off.
Yeah.
And it's just a difference. There are two different worldviews, and when you see this sort of debased minimum wage coverage from Fox News, you realize sometimes you're just never going to get through to people like that.
The sad thing is to me, conservatism has changed radically over the last 30 or 40 years. And I often point to my friends to look at Uncle Milton Friedman's negative tax, which was basically the blueprint for the Reagan era earned income tax credit that kind of props up the low wage workforce. And I got to be honest, there's part of me that says maybe we should be having that kind of conversation as well. If the minimum wage isn't going to be increased, maybe we need to have a conversation about guaranteed minimum income. And if I remember right, back in the 70s when Uncle Milty came up with this idea, his thought was that every man, woman, child in the country would be given $6,000. So that a family of 4 would have 24 grand, and that's well above the poverty line, able to exist and able to participate in the consumer-based economy, which he knew the businesses would get back.
Yeah, and that's actually something the conservatives called it a negative income tax, but economists often call it just a universal basic income. And Milton Friedman came up with a sort of euphemistic way of discussing it so that it wouldn't blow the dog whistles that alert people to be, that alert certain types of conservatives to be worried about certain types of programs. But, there's good research on universal basic incomes. It's probably not something that we're ever going to get toward in the United States, but we do have programs that are similar toward it. such as Social Security, which is a form of universal basic income for retirees. We have the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a way of supporting wages for low-wage workers. We have the Child Tax Credit, which is a way of supporting wages for low-wage workers with children and families. And these are programs that are vital. They help millions of people. One of the things that we're seeing increasingly is that instead of increasing the minimum wage, you're hearing conservatives talk about how they want to increase the Earned Income Tax Credit. The only problem with that is if you expand the Earned Income Tax Credit while you're also cutting taxes for millionaires and billionaires, what you're essentially doing is forcing the middle class, which is already diminishing on its own, to support the poverty wages of the poor.
Right.
When if you just had higher wages, you wouldn't need the tax incentives themselves at all.
Because, you know, you go back to that welfare cliff that that Gary Alexander, our former guy here, had thrown out. It makes a little bit of sense on a certain level, and I would have to argue. I would hope there were policies that would be gradual as you made more. What you got back and help would go down at a slower pace. I would hope that that's the policy, that it just wasn't a complete drop off, that you made 50 cents more, that's it, you're cut off.
Yeah, and one of the biggest problems with the welfare cliff is sort of the Secretary of State Alexander's example in Pennsylvania was saying that, you know, a mother of two who was single and was earning $57,000 a year could earn up to $57,000 a year if she took advantage of all of 12 or 13 cash benefit programs.
That seems high.
And it would be more money after taxes than if she was making something like $75,000 a year in wages. But how many people even have the opportunity to make $75,000 a year? How many single moms with two kids to take care of at home have the opportunity to have a job where they're making 75 grand? It's just not a real scenario where you could ever imagine any more than a handful of people falling into that welfare cliff argument.
And the other part of it is they throw that number out there knowing that most people don't make 75,000. And this is my problem with this idea of pushing for a guaranteed minimum income, that if you don't have everyone participating and benefiting from it, what you then have are a bunch of people that can be divided and pitted against one another, which is, you know, what I see when you talk about school lunch programs or welfare programs or any of the other things that are out there. It's always that thing to divide us, in my view.
Yeah, and of course, anyone who's working full time, who makes less than 75,000, looks at this and says and thinks to themselves, "Oh, there must be a whole community of people. There must be hundreds, thousands of people who are gaming the system. You know, I'm working hard, I'm paying taxes, and there are people out there who are gaming the system and making more money off of that system than I am." But the facts are that it's almost unimaginable to spend the amount of time that you would need to spend just filling out the paperwork to qualify for a dozen simultaneous programs all at once. It would require, honestly, more effort than just working full time, which is why it's not something that you can really ever find anyone doing. And that's why, you know, in this Seattle instance, what they went to was a somewhat leftist libertarian radio talk show host who talked about it as a thought experiment. They couldn't find a single person who actually fit the description because those people simply don't exist.
Sure, they're not riding around with the welfare queen and the small family farmer who lost his farm because of the estate tax. They're all in the bus together.
Yeah, they're back there in Ronald Reagan's welfare queen advertisements from the 1980s. But even that, you know, the one real example that you could find of right-wing media uncovering someone who honestly looks like a fraudster is Jason Greenslade, the food stamp surfer in California. And that's one person. There are 46 million people who receive supplemental nutrition assistance monthly. The number of people in the program has dropped significantly since the height during the recession, but you're talking about millions of people, tens of millions of people. And what did Fox find? One guy, one person. And they tried to make that person famous and infamous, and hopefully it didn't work.
And that's enough to scrap the whole program from everybody. We found one.
Yeah.
Scrap the whole thing.
You could go out there, you could go into any big city, you can go into any rural community in the country, go to a grocery store for 30 minutes and find someone who's using SNAP, who's using WIC, someone who's using some form of state, local, or federal food assistance. You could talk to that person and find out what their life is like, what their struggle is like. You could try for 1 week to feed yourself on $35, which is something I've done. It's something millions of people around the country have done. You can find out how difficult that is to do. Try doing that for a month. Try doing that for 6 months.
And then try having that be your reality. And I'm generally opposed to those give it a try things because at the end of the week, I'm going back. Try having that be your reality. And, I lived it as a child. So I saw firsthand the end of the month, cupboards bare. That was the reality, which is why, as someone who is solidly in the middle class, I am not opposed to helping folks at the bottom because you know what? I was there once and hey, you never know. I may be there again at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to not ever be in that position growing up, but I knew kids that did. I went to school with kids that did. I can go ahead and do a food stamp challenge for a week, or if I wanted to stretch it out, I could do it for a month. And afterward, I still get to not be on food stamps. I still get to not have to live in poverty. But if you wake up hungry every single day, you start off at the starting gates with a disadvantage. And if you're forced to earn the minimum wage where your full-time work still puts you in poverty, you wake up every single day at a disadvantage. And to think that those people are gaming the system rather being gamed by it is honestly, it's immoral.
I'm with you. Last question. Do we get a minimum wage increase during the Obama tenure?
I don't think there's any way to get it past the current Congress. They're clearly just not interested in moving that forward. Maybe there will be some kind of come to Jesus moment if the 2016 elections turn out to be a complete disaster for the party, but it's hard to see how a minimum wage increase would get through Congress. But at this point, most of the minimum wage movement and all of the progress is happening at the state and local level, where things are actually developing in very important ways that are going to provide a blueprint for the future.
Yeah, so there's a legacy moment for the president. He and Ronald Reagan will be the only presidents since the minimum wage's inception to have it not raised during his tenure.
Well, Obama did raise it in 2009, and then conservatives point to that as a reason that we lost 600,000 jobs that year, ignoring the fact that the economy had been in recession for 2 years. So he was able to get one in very early, but what we need is a lot more movement on it.
Obama raised the minimum wage?
Yeah, I think it was July 2009.
I think we should probably check that. Because that was something that was an automatic thing from the 2007, right?
You know what? You're right.
That wasn't the president.
He oversaw it, but he didn't sign it.
Okay, that's good. Now we're right. Craig, I appreciate the time, man. Great talking with you.
My pleasure.
Craig Harrington, economic researcher over at Media Matters for America. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. That was the day labor leader William Silvis died. Silvis was born in Armball, Pennsylvania. He learned the trade of wagon making from his father, but soon he left home to take up an apprenticeship as an iron worker. He found work in Philadelphia. At the time, there was an increasing practice of iron molders to hire unskilled workers as helpers for the skilled craftsmen. This led to skilled workers seeing their wages cut. Silvis joined a strike against the wage erosion led by the Journeyman Stove and Hollowware Molders Union. Soon, he was elected secretary of the union. But Silvis understood that to truly have power, the iron molders would need to organize beyond Philadelphia. And so in 1859, 12 molders from various unions met in Philadelphia to plan to join together. The Civil War put those plans on hold. During the war, as men went to fight, many workers saw their wages increase due to the labor shortage. But prices at the stores rose even more quickly, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for labor to organize, in 1863, Silvis helped found the Iron Molders International Union. He became the first president of the new union. 21 locals joined under the Iron Molders International Union, and it grew to include 8,000 workers. But Silvis had a bigger vision for the labor movement. He thought all skilled trades should band together to improve wages and working conditions. So in 1866, he founded the National Labor Union. The National Labor Union quickly grew to 30,000 workers. But Silvis died in 1869, cutting short his efforts to grow a national union. The union continued until 1873, when it dissolved.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
The worldwide system of hotels that exists today began its development in Europe and New England during the 1800s. The early precursors of American hotels were the old inns of medieval Europe, and the word hotel is derived from the French word hotel, which meant a building that had frequent visitors. While the American colonies were developing, travelers could usually find rooms to sleep in taverns or small inns, much like today's bed and breakfast residences. It was rare for women to travel, so the norm was for local men and sporadic travelers to gather for drinks at taverns. It was clearly a place for male bonding, conversations, sipping ale, and occasionally political meetings. Nowhere were these more prolific than Boston. As the town grew, the taverns and inns began to add rooms for travelers and were referred to as lodging houses. Join us next time for the Parker House. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Well, it's started again. I turn around flame. I move into people that want to defend human rights, a fair wage, a quick return to decent days. Equality is in play. Workers should organize without haste. Have the vote in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again. The change, a new labor rate.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So the big Politico article that has been emailed to me several times today that says that Donald Trump is a union member. The Trumpster actually carries a union card. They write, in fact, he's a union supporter. According to that, Trump evidently has been steadfast in his support of private sector unions. He says the unions still have a place in American society. In fact, with globalization craze in full heat, unions are about the only political force remaining, reminding us to remember the American working family. Trump actually pointed out Teamster President Jim Hoffa and gave him particular praise, saying his knees don't jerk, and if anyone knows how to bring the Teamsters back to their rightful place at the table, Jim is the man. I wonder if this is one of those moments where maybe we get the Teamsters to come out early for us, like they did for Obama.
You know, Rick, I've been saying this for a while. I think Trump is nothing but a liberal troll planted by Hillary Clinton in the Republican field. He's supporting unions now. Is this his planned attack against Scott Walker?
But what's interesting, someone had there was another Politico article that I was reading about Trump that evidently Politico had asked one of his chairmen up in New Hampshire, up in Grafton County, New Hampshire, who evidently is the Trump person. He's the guy up there. He's supposed to be, Trump's our guy, who said that, I'm not 100%. I'm his guy, but maybe within, I guess, a couple hours, a retraction email was was published, and the Trump camp saying, well, we don't know. We don't know why he did it. You got to imagine that there was some, how did they say that? They used to say that greasing of the palms going on. Maybe this is one of my palms itching. Maybe you should scratch it. And it's the abrasiveness of cash in my hand that makes the itching go away. So there you go. The Donald. I'm loving the Trump campaign. I got to be honest, loving it. Amazed at how really either non-involved we are as a society, or just.
I think somewhere Berlusconi is just sitting back with his feet up on a sofa.
Yeah,
saying,
Silvio,
saying it's not me. I mean, I think Donald Trump is probably running one of the best campaigns of the modern era. I mean, can we just come out and say it now?
I'm there. You hear a lot of people saying, well, he should have apologized about John McCain. He was never going to do that. And what's interesting to me is everyone was saying, this is the end of him. If you remember, I wasn't that guy. I'm going, this is what they think. Are we surprised?
And you know what the best thing about that was? Well, there's like a 30-second throwaway clip that he had out there, and that just like sucked all the oxygen out of all the other major political news stories over the past week.
It's beautiful.
And they tried to sink him, and he tripled down. He's going to quadruple down on it.
He's
probably.
never going to apologize. Understand this. He is, and look, this is a talk radio kind of guy running for president. A guy who truly understands you don't really have an ideology, because it's interesting. He's all over the map politically, other than his hatred of immigrants. And I got to think that that's more having to do with he knows the base better than the base knows itself. And you throw that red meat out and they go, yes, we hate immigrants. Arr!
It's like catnip.
Exactly. Well, it's like crack. It's not catnip. It's like crack. They go, yes, immigrants. Arr! And they go crazy. And you throw this stuff out there, and look, 30 years of looking at talk radio's success and knowing how the Limbaughs of the world have done masterful work at enraging the enrageable and getting them to, basically act completely against their own best economic interests and side with the 1% while thinking somehow they're in control. It's beautiful. It's masterful. It's a masterful mind. Can't use the
and he's out there using that like textbook to a T.
Oh, it's brilliant.
And like everyone is just eating it up, the media and everyone else. I mean, it's just it's amazing. It makes you wonder though, is he trying to get a job at Fox News?
Oh, he doesn't need a job at Fox News. He could probably buy Fox News. He understands he wants to be president. He's not going away. He understands immortality. And we've talked about this before. The presidency is immortality. The Koch brothers at some point will be forgotten. There are people in this country today who don't know who the Vanderbilts were, who don't know who Andrew Carnegie is. But you know what? They know the presidents. And that forever, in 100 years, they'll be saying, there was a president, President Donald Trump.
Imagine what would happen if he wins like Iowa or he wins New Hampshire.
He's going to buy Iowa. What are you talking about?
He wins one of the first, he'll ship some actors in there to vote in the caucuses. But imagine if I can't wait to see what would happen if he wins Iowa, and the media would just like, I don't know. I think he goes through the winner. I
think he goes pretty far in. Maybe Super Tuesday it ends, but I'm hoping he's still in the mix
if he's
at convention time. That would be brilliant. That would be absolutely
if he's still in by Super Tuesday. Oh, the campaign is just sunk. Like the Republican ticket is just like, I mean, you're hitting like what? You're hitting the bottom of the ocean down there. Is he dragging them into the great abyss?
Yes.
At that point,
yes. And it will be fun to watch. And then that's when Hillary takes him as VP. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. Headstrong, we're headstrong. Back off, I'll take you on. Headstrong to take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. If this is not where you belong. I won't give everything.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great, big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates. And in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure, I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that, yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier?
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change and the mega drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis that created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know, I guess, when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report, so I guess I just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So did you see the Chuck Todd takedown by Bernie Sanders? Good stuff there. And it's, basically what I was saying for all of last week, that it's the economics. To me, it is the economics. And while the race issue I do think is extremely important, I think the economic part equally, if not more important. Because I think, as Dr. King said, what good is sitting at a lunch counter when you can't afford to buy a hamburger? Makes kind of sense to me. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about that and some other things, our good friend, Editor Zero over at the Raging Chicken Press, Kevin Mahoney. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us, man.
Hey, Rick, great to be back. Raging Monday, here we go.
So everyone was all taken by the Netroots Nation disturbance, rally, whatever you want to call it, that we're kind of pushing O'Malley and Sanders towards what I was saying was purity. I'm curious your thoughts.
Frankly, I don't even look at it like that, Rick. Is that I know that's the direction that a lot of the kind of the chat went, like immediately after it was going on Netroots Nation, and they need to stand up and do this and X, Y, and Z. But frankly, kind of looking back, like historically, this is how movements work, right? Is that this is how movements build. And for my first reaction when I saw that, other than the fact I was a bit kind of taken back just by Bernie's on-stage presence. Right, that was a little surprising to me. But what more often than anything else, I'm like, this is an opportunity. This is one of these moments where the movement gets to build and grow. And I was thinking back to, you look at what was happening with Black Lives Matter after we kind of, saw the murders of Freddie Gray, of Walter Scott, of Trayvon Martin, of Tamir Rice, one after the other. And then what we began to see is at the beginning of 2015, we've saw this other hashtag that started coming in, this other part of that movement, which was called Say Her Name. It was about the women, about Black women who were killed in jail or killed by police, right? Which had been up until that point, had not been part, or at least had been not in the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? And so there was discussion, there was a bit of a kerfuffle, but then they got together and said, yes, we're moving forward in this. And when I saw that at Netroots Nation, my first response was like, hey, this is that opportunity. Now we'll see what happens next. Because Bernie's line has been all along, right? This is not just new to his presidential campaign. This has been, what he's been doing for decades now, has been, it's going to take a political revolution. It's going to take a social movement. And for me, this is one of those moments where the social movement can happen. And what he did on Chuck Todd, what's that show that he hosts like this week with Chuck Todd or whatever it is. But what he did this past week is that, he spoke squarely. What I've actually heard Bernie say this stuff before. He said, these things are parallel. Racial justice and economic justice are parallel movements. It doesn't have to be one at the expense of the other or one even before the other. They happen together. And if anybody knows this better than anyone else, it's the labor movement, right? Because some of the worst points in the labor movement's history and labor's history has been when they've ignored those questions. That's what's divided the movement. You look at labor history in twos. Just this past month, several of the segments that you did are kind of featured, those exact struggles. And the labor movement got stronger when it addressed everything together. right? And I love how you always go back to what Dr. Martin Luther King was saying, right? But he wasn't saying, yeah, you know what, I'm past the race thing, need to get on to that economic justice thing, or the other way around, that these things happen together. And so for me, this is like democracy in action. And my first response was to kind of jump in and kind of guess, you know what, this is going to settle out a little bit unless the mainstream media goes insane with it. But this can only strengthen the movement, that it can actually get a progressive in office that could address all these things at once.
Do you think the mainstream media has kicked off on it? Do you think that they've spun this in the wrong way?
Yeah, well, I mean, what they're trying to do. That's why I think that the segment on with Chuck Todd this past weekend was so important, because Chuck Todd tried to do that. He said, "Yeah, we saw what happened at Netroots Nation, right, where you had this confrontation with Black Lives Matter," and Bernie shut him down right immediately. And he comes back and he said, "This was not a confrontation. These were people that were raising absolutely important issues." And unlike what we saw from Hillary Clinton, who kind of appropriated some of the language of the movement, like Bernie brought it right back into the struggle and the movement building. He said, these are things that happen together that we need to move forward. That went back to the connections between racial justice and economic justice, which has been at the heart of his story ever since. Right. And I think that resonates a bit with folks. And I don't know if you saw this, but just today, CNN released a poll, right, that has Bernie Sanders coming out beating Bush, beating Walker, and beating Trump. Right. And if you look at just likely voters right now, he's like neck and neck when it comes with Bush, and still beats everyone else. Because I think that message is resonating. Right. And the fact is that I think the mainstream media, when they start to draw on what happened at Netroots Nation, right, has the potential to distort what's been happening, or what can happen with the Bernie Sanders campaign, in my view, at least. And that is by kind of saying, look at what's going on the left, but, without ever saying that, look, Netroots Nation is a very kind of specific group of progressives that get together each year. Right. And that organization has been slowly changing to focus more upon movement building, a community-based organization. So part of what we saw there was just simply what's happening inside the dynamics of Netroots Nation. But more importantly, I think for all of us, is like this speaks to the potential growth and the potential power of a combined movement.
And you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right in Bernie saying right from the beginning, it's going to take a mass movement to get people to come around and to get people engaged and activated. And you're right. This is part of that.
Right, absolutely right. And look, and the thing is as much as some of the criticism came to Bernie, but frankly, you know what? Some of the politics of this, like this is what happens in the primary campaigns, right? Is that candidates get sharpened, right? And they have to take their lumps, right? And frankly, if you look at how Bernie Sanders has kind of adjusted what he's been doing, not just like added something onto his message, but in terms of like his kind of adjusting his tone, says, listen, I need to speak even more forthrightly and directly, like I have before, in order to kind of make sure that everyone sees that this is an inclusive movement. And that's kind of what he did. Right. And so frankly, that's a good thing. Right. I mean, I would rather have Bernie Sanders kind of go through this process of having to get sharpened and having to kind of take some blows early on, right, than wait until you get all the Clinton money start piling in in the campaign.
My initial reaction, and I'll be honest, my gut reaction was, I understand you make your point, you disrupt, you make your point, and then you allow the proceeds to go, the thing to proceed and go forward. And Bernie was obviously, kind of miffed a little bit and said, I can always leave if you don't want me here, which is his way. I mean, that's what the guy does. And I remember in the aftermath, I was reading a lot of the responses, the tweets, and all of the stories coming out. And I remember thinking, this is a guy who's, and this is part of my journey in this thought as well. This is a guy who's your guy. He's been talking about race issues for his entire political career. Why would you have this public display of purity against somebody who's 110% in your camp? And the more I've been thinking about it and chewing it and moving it around, the more I kind of now have come a little bit around to it.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you what, I was talking. You had Drew Gibson on the show last week, right? And I was actually talking to Drew online a little bit about this stuff right after his article came out in Raging Chicken Press. And I was saying, and he and I were back and forth on this. And one of the things that he made a really good point in that back and forth is one of the things that he said. Part of what the issue is right now, a lot of at least the established, the people who are running for office right now don't actually realize. The Democratic Party certainly doesn't realize. There's actually two lefts in this country right now. there's two kind of like burgeoning movements. One is an economic movement, right? Another one is kind of coalescing around this Black Lives Matter. And they have a different kind of point of entry into what's going on. The economic movement is about like how we kind of turn the ship, right, and right the ship in order to put this in a direction that's more democratic and more progressive, right? What you see that's coming out of the Black Lives Matters, it's the immediacy, right, that we can't afford to wait, right, that we need to look at because of this person, because of Freddie Gray, Walter Scott. We just saw, here again, her name is Ralkina Jones. Just again, another African-American woman found dead in prison after getting arrested for having a fight with her husband. Right. So this kind of stuff, the idea that we have to pay attention to the names, the particular people, the stories, because this is real. This is happening now. It's not abstract. And at the same time, we need to right the ship like along the way.
Right.
And for me, those two things, those are pillars of building a strong movement. And I can't think of a better way of contextualizing it. So I think that people like Bernie just kind of need to be aware and understand more that there's power in this movement, but it doesn't necessarily speak with the exact same language. And so part of that is conversation, which I saw Netroots Nation as a conversation beginner right then and there.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing because it's got me talking about it more often as well, because I fall in that economic camp. I'm of the mindset that everything comes back to the economic side of it. You go back to Sandra Bland. If she's got the $500 to get out of jail on that afternoon that she's arrested and she can afford to get a lawyer to come fight for her, she's not dead 3 days later. To me, everything comes back down to economic power and the wealth of community, which, in my view, if the African-American community had the kind of wealth that has been stolen from them over the generations, I think would see a lot of this change. That may just be naive on my part, but I got to think as an entire community, if they had the same kind of wealth, you wouldn't see this at the level that we do.
No, I think that's true, but also I would push back a little bit. If you think about some of even how labor has kind of made progress over the centuries, right? On the one hand, it's made the broad argument about we need to push for this kind of economic redistribution. We need to have our share. We need to have the 8-hour day, right? But in this fight at the moment, right, it made that case and it made the case for these specific things in this contract. Right, which a lot of people that were kind of more far to the left and kind of wanted the purity would say that you are compromising. You're just arguing for small reforms. That's not going to change the thing, right? But really, what it was, that's the process of labor movements, right? That was the process of any social movement. You fight for these specific things as the way to move forward. And what's interesting about that too, as well, about the way that what happened at Netroots has kind of distorted this conversation, in my view, has been if you follow what was happening with Black Lives Matter right from the get-go, right? The economic questions were always front and center, right? They have been there. Every time there was a report that came out, when Trayvon Martin, when Freddie Gray, when all these people were these kids were killed, these young men were killed, these women were killed, right? There was the focus again, especially around Ferguson. There was the focus on what has happened to that area. Why is it that we see these splits along racial lines? It isn't just because of racism, although racism is a huge factor in that. It has everything to do with that. People were able to kind of split the working class, or split people and kind of say, hey, look, you're black, you're going to stay over here, and we're going to strip all the jobs away from you, and we're going to impoverish you and give us more ways to kind of reap the benefits of this division. Right. So the economic question has always been there along the line. We saw it in Baltimore, too, as well. And that's why I said that Netroots Nation, in my mind, was just a distortion of where even Black Lives Matter has come from and what they have come through. And I think we're seeing this kind of come back around after the first kind of blow up of the media event, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and it comes down to a lot of it, and economics is I think the big part of it, but also education and public transportation. I mean, you could go through a whole list of things that we've done to our urban centers as well as our rural areas.
Yep.
That have fostered this inequality and this situation. Which, again, I like the idea of a movement. I like the idea of grassroots. I like the idea of pushing politicians to where we want them to go. And I think you're right. I think Bernie has answered that, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes in the near future.
Absolutely. I agree.
Good stuff.
Take care of business.
There you go. Kevin, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks so much. And we look forward to next Monday where we can rage on once again.
We are back at it. We'll see you then.
All righty. Thanks so much, Kevin Mahoney. Raging Chicken Press, Editor Zero over there. You can check out their website, ragingchickenpress.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Kevin's name. Take it right there. Quick break. Right back.
Think of all the roads, think of all their crossings. Taking steps is easy, standing still is hard. Remember all their faces, remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
By a one-vote margin, the U.S. Senate passed fast-track authority to expedite passage of the disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, which will export beaucoup more of our country's middle-class jobs. That's the kind of pro-corporate stupidity the Republican Congress specializes in these days. But wait, the key votes for the fast track came from a baker's dozen of Senate Democrats. Fast track is a railroad job to enthrone global corporate power over us. It will allow the Obama administration to send the massive 12-country trade scam to Congress for an up or down vote with little debate and no amendments allowed. Details of this thing are being negotiated in strict secrecy between top government officials and top executives of some 500 global corporations. Workers, consumers, and all the rest of us are shut out. The majority of Americans oppose this giveaway, so what's with the 13 turncoat Democrats? Not to worry, they say, trade benefits everyone. Do they think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Americans know that these trade schemes make the super rich richer, while the incomes of practically everyone else go south. There's still a chance to defeat the TPP because a gritty, well-organized populist coalition is rallying grassroots opposition to reject this raw deal. To join the fight, go to citizen.org/trade. This is Jim Hightower saying, and don't forget the 13 Democratic sellouts. If any one of them had stood with the people on the fast-track vote, we would have already derailed TPP. The 13 senators who said nuts to you are Michael Bennet, Maria Cantwell, Tom Carper, Chris Coons, Dianne Feinstein, Heidi Heitkamp, Tim Kaine, Claire McCaskill, Patty Murray, Bill Nelson, Jean Shaheen, Mark Warner, and Ron Wyden.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is Your World in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, with the Talk Radio News Service. The military coalition targeting the Islamic State got a boost overnight as the Turkish Air Force struck targets within Syria. It's the first time Turkey has directly intervened in the 4-year Syrian civil war. In addition to mobilizing its army, Turkey is also allowing the U.S. to launch jets from air bases in Incirlik and Diyarbakir, enabling easier American bombing runs to targets in Syria and Iraq. East African negotiators have released a compromise agreement to resolve the 19-month civil war in South Sudan. The agreement calls for a unity government, security sector reform, and a path to elections, but it lacks one crucial thing: vocal support from the warring factions behind President Salva Kiir and his former deputy Riek Machar. Earlier this week, the NGO Human Rights Watch released a report detailing a range of war crimes allegedly committed during a government offensive this spring. Those crimes reportedly included mass rapes and executions, the burning of homes, and the crushing of fleeing civilians under tanks. And the president of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, has been re-elected to a controversial third term in office, according to election results released today. In seeking re-election, Nkurunziza defied critics who cited a constitutional limit of 2 terms in office, and his decision sparked violence across the country and an unsuccessful coup attempt in May. While media reports suggested tepid voter engagement, today's results alleged 74% turnout and nearly 70% support for the president. The majority of Nkurunziza's opponents boycotted the elections. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Leanne Naramore. On Fox News' America's Newsroom, correspondent Dan Springer misleadingly reported on the unintended consequences of Seattle raising the minimum wage.
The minimum wage here in Seattle went to $11 an hour in April, on its way to $15 an hour by 2018. Some people have figured out that with the pay raise, they'll make too much money to stay on certain welfare programs.
Springer went on to claim that increased wages are also increasing prices at restaurants. Despite Fox News' latest attempts to attack and shame the poor, neither of these claims are true. The argument that government assistance and benefits are too generous and thus drive recipients out of work has been thoroughly debunked by experts for years. In addition, a recent report by Common Dreams showed that several of the most outspoken local opponents of Seattle's minimum wage increase have actually opened new restaurants and increased staff hiring since the ordinance went into effect. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The UAW is having a busy summer. In addition to bargaining a new auto contract at GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, the union has also just opened bargaining for 17,000 Michigan state workers. The UAW's Ed Mitchell says the UAW, the largest Michigan state employee union, wants Michigan to prosper and for UAW members to share in the value of the hard work it takes to keep the state running efficiently. What's outrageous? Apparently living wages. Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis, who gets approximately $4,889 an hour, says that $15 an hour for low-wage food industry workers in New York is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. But lest you think of Travis as some greedy cretin from a century or two ago who doesn't believe in living wages for workers, he wants to set you straight. He would be perfectly okay with $12 an hour since he thinks that is a realistic living wage. Problem is, Dunkin' Donuts pays workers an average of $8.99 an hour. So in Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis's world, $4,889 an hour for the boss is just fine, while paying workers $15 an hour is somehow bad. He says it would prevent Dunkin' Donuts from hiring new workers. But Nigel could fix that problem himself. He could drop his pay to $150 an hour and use the rest to hire 315 more workers. In the WIN Sports Minute, Mitch Lawrence says, despite positive reviews for LeBron James's performance in the film Trainwreck, it's hard to beat Becky Hammons' real-life performance.
James has gotten a lot of positive reviews, but when it comes to trying out a new profession and succeeding, it's hard to beat what Becky Hammon is doing. Hammon is a former WNBA player who now is a full-time assistant with the San Antonio Spurs. This summer, she made history. She was the first female to coach a team in the NBA's Las Vegas Summer League, and she's the first female coach to win it, as she guided the Spurs to a 6-1 record. In light of her success, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said he has, quote, no doubts, unquote, that one day a woman will be coaching an NBA team. Now, there's even talk that Hammon will be the one to break the NBA's glass ceiling. But everyone needs to remember that she's not even a lead assistant with the Spurs. Hammon sits in the second row, behind head coach Greg Popovich and his trio of top assistants. Also remember this, it's not easy to get one of the 30 NBA head coaching jobs. Just ask someone like Patrick Ewing, a former superstar with the New York Knicks and a longtime assistant who is still looking for his first head coaching gig. But it's certainly great to see that the NBA is already thinking about putting a woman in the ultimate position of power. With a Sports Minute for Workers Independent News, this is Mitch Lawrence.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
I will oppose the Colombia Free Trade Agreement.
Now it's time to clear the way for a series of trade agreements.
You can trust me.
From the Monongahela Valley to the Mesabi Iron Range, the coal mines of Appalachia, the story's always the same. 700 tons of metal a day. Now, sir, you tell me the world's changed. Once I made you rich enough to forget my name. In Youngstown.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So still lots of goings on, still lots of opportunities to push back against this Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Agreement. I got to tell you, everything I'm seeing, not good. Not good from, I think, our point of view. And it's more of that, you look around the world and there's some problems, and let's just give them our industry. That kind of, and I think George Carlin did a bit about this, especially, I forget when it was. He goes, how did that go? We go in, we wipe out the trouble, and we whip a little industry on them. Because that is, as he pointed out, the middle two letters in the word U.S. In the word industry. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about the TPP and where things are kind of going, where the hangups are. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to reach out to our friends over at Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. She's a field organizer over there. Catherine Johnson, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So I look at this, and there's a bunch of reports coming out now that there's maybe not all of the doneness of this deal that I had thought just a couple of weeks ago.
Absolutely. There was a lot of talk as they were trying to pass the Fast Track Trade Promotion Authority through that the negotiations were almost concluded, but the truth is there are still substantive issues that still need to be resolved. So as the 12 countries are going into the negotiations in Hawaii, which start tomorrow, there's still several issues that need to be resolved and need to be discussed.
And you look at some of the countries that we're going to be dealing with. I was reading about New Zealand and dairy being the big thing there, and how dairy could be one of the sticking points of the entire thing. And I'm going, do I really want milk from around the world? Can't I just get it from the farm up the street from my house?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's an interesting dynamic between Canada, Japan, and New Zealand in talking about dairy, that they all want to open up each other's markets, but they don't want to get rid of protections of their own markets. Now, this is especially the case in Canada, which has a very protected dairy industry, and Canada hasn't even put forth a beginning position on these negotiations. And so Japan, New Zealand, and the US are all waiting for that. And there was even some rumbling that if they didn't put forward a negotiating position, that maybe they would be left out. I don't think that's really likely. They would be left out of the agreement, but it really shows how serious these market access issues are. And it's not just dairy. Japan's rice industry, too, is another highly protected area that the U.S. would love to open up. Automobiles made in Japan, especially since Japan exports to the United States 130 cars, automobiles, for every one automobile that the U.S. sends to Japan. So it's 130 times more exports. And Japan is not anxious to open up their industry.
Of course not. Well, they've got the better side of the deal in this. And again, you could have the argument going, well, this is why we need to have these agreements. And I got to tell you, I've always been of the mindset that you produce as a nation what you need and what you can produce, and that for which you can't, you trade over. It seems to me that we've lost that completely, and we've gone to this, well, whoever can do it cheaper, they're going to do it, and everybody else will just get stuff from them. It seems kind of twisted to me as a working class person.
Absolutely. There are so many things that we produce in the United States that as we've opened up our economy with these free trade agreements, we've seen the global race to the bottom as the production moves to lower income, lower wage countries. And so you really see the potential, some of that opposition because of that in the textiles industry. For example, here in the United States, there's still some textiles and some shoes especially that are still produced here. And there's a lot of concern amongst textile producers in opening up our market to Vietnam, which has a minimum wage of 60 cents per hour. And there's especially a lot of concern that Vietnam will produce clothes with cloth from China and then export it to the United States without any tariffs, thus essentially opening up that industry to the billion-plus workers there in China.
I look at this, a lot of the discussion around this trade agreement, and the president has made it, and Bill Clinton made it back with NAFTA, that there was going to be strong environmental and labor restrictions in this. And now understand, I haven't read the TPP, and I don't think you have either. But I'm not buying the strong environmental and labor restriction part of it.
And there's so many good reasons to really doubt that's been promised in past trade agreements, and we haven't seen it. We've seen, for example, in the labor enforcement parts of these agreements, we've never seen a successful labor complaint brought under these free trade agreements. We just saw a new complaint brought by Peruvian unions with the help of the AFL-CIO because of the abuses in Peru, and Peru is one of the members of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So even as there's ongoing abuses there, as well as in other countries, especially the lower income countries, even though they're currently violating a lot of these labor standards that are supposedly in the TPP, we're still moving forward with negotiations. And with the environmental chapter, we actually did see a draft of it, and it falls far short of what the major environmental groups here in the United States would like to see.
So what do you say to the person who says, Kat, we really, we need to help these countries? Because I've gotten this argument from a lot of my liberal friends who say, well, we need to help these poor countries because they're being abused, and we're going to help spread democracy with capitalism, and we're going to do all of this stuff that's going to give them the opportunity to rise up and be more like us. And I'm sure you've heard that argument a number of times. How do you respond to that?
I think looking at history is one of the best ways to respond to it. So looking at, for example, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, which was entirely with developing countries. What we haven't seen in Central America, along with the Dominican Republic, which is also part of it, what we haven't seen there has been fast economic growth under CAFTA. What we've seen instead was a decimation of the farming sector, especially the small-scale farms throughout Central America, which has led to a massive migration to the cities, looking for jobs there, and then from there, of course, a massive flow of migrants to the United States. So especially when there's also massive opposition in a lot of these developing countries, with reason. And
so it's not just people like me, just not crazy working class, labor friendly folks like me who are going, no, this is a bad idea. We're going to lose jobs. It's actually people in other countries too.
Definitely concerned about the jobs, but also concerned about, since this agreement doesn't just open up markets, it actually restricts some markets further. So for example, under the intellectual property rights, it would actually put more restrictions on medicines, and especially the crucial generic medicines that people in developing countries need access to, that we're pushing our stricter intellectual property rules, and even stricter than those that we have in the United States in some cases, on these developing countries that need. And so we've seen recently letters from, for example, Doctors Without Borders denouncing these restrictions on generic medicines.
Yeah, but we could bring those other countries the wonderful benefits that we have here of paying the highest prices for drugs in the free world.
Since we pay double the average price of other OECD countries.
Yeah, we can have we can have that same pride in knowing that we pay retail, Catherine.
Yeah, New Zealand is really concerned about this as well. It's not just the developing economies. They have a very vibrant, public option for their medical care, medical provision, and much lower drug costs. And they're really concerned that they would instead have to be like the United States and not have access to medicine and to medical care for their citizens.
So since they have a public option, something I was really in big favor of here when we were debating the Obamacare stuff, I was a single payer guy, but that's a whole nother story. Does that mean potentially they could lose their public option kind of thing, since it could be conceived as a barrier to profits?
One of the big things that they could lose is actually their ability to negotiate lower prices for drugs. So currently, it's easier for government programs to negotiate lower prices because they're huge buyers of these drugs. But there's one requirement in the TPP that's being negotiated that actually would give drug companies a lot more access to those numbers, those prices that governments pay, and how they make those decisions, and be able to put further restrictions on these government medical programs.
So in looking at this, I mean, as a whole, because, my reaction to it is, I don't like the idea. I think it's a bad idea. It's more of the NAFTA style trade that I just haven't seen us benefit from. And it's been destructive in almost everything that I've seen. Is there anything positive in this that you go, this is something that would be good and could create jobs in the U.S.?
Not really, unfortunately, because the labor unions, though there are a few of them have been part of the negotiations, for the most part, they haven't really had access and haven't been able to push for working people. They really haven't been at the table. So what we see is things that might potentially be beneficial for the U.S. economy, but not necessarily for U.S. workers.
Yeah, because I look at this, and in every equation, there's a winner and there's a loser. There's something a positive on the and there's something negative, and it just seems to me that either our negotiators are really horrible, because a lot seem to be on the negatives, or they're really crafty in who they're negotiating for, and I'm not the kind of person that they're negotiating for.
Absolutely. We see so many protections for big corporations in here. Like I said, the extension of intellectual property for brand name medicines and other types of intellectual property too. Right now, the United States, for example, has one of the most restrictive copyright laws, where most materials are copyrighted for the life of the author plus 70 years. And we're trying to force all of the members of the TPP to adopt that as well, along with heavy criminal penalties for people who violate copyright laws. So this is one example of the way that we're actually restricting trade in this agreement to benefit corporations.
But do you think a lot of people would be in favor of the copyright thing? I mean, because we all look on the TV and see, the FBI is going to come and you're going to get 5 years in jail, $250,000 fines if you copy this video. We've all come to go, okay, whatever.
Well, the trouble is when we force the providers, the sort of aggregators of a lot of the content to police their own, the content that's on their sites. So I don't know if in case you remember the SOPA and PIPA laws that were proposed before, and there was a massive outrage. We saw the blackout of the internet. There's a possibility that this would enforce those styles of laws.
Wow.
Where something like Yahoo could be prosecuted for what somebody puts on the internet, and they happen to have come up in their search.
Interesting. Because here at the end of it, and this is kind of the last area I wanted to get into, I just don't see how competing with the likes of Malaysia, the likes of Vietnam, I don't see how structurally we can compete with them based on our wage structure, their wage structure. Yeah, I get the whole transportation part of it. I don't see how we can compete.
No, I mean, the main way that we can compete, unfortunately, is going to be by reducing our wages here in the United States. And without a strong minimum wages here in the United States, without other protections for workers here, we could definitely see the erosion of wages and other protections for workers here in the U.S. for sure.
See, now during the NAFTA years, and I remember this argument quite well, they were saying, well, what's going to happen is the U.S. wages will go down a little bit to meet Mexico, and then we'll all go up together because then we'll all be on the same playing field. Do you see this as the goal of the TPP, or have we gotten well beyond that? And the reality is, you're just going to work for lower wages.
Certainly how they're trying to pitch it is that that it'll grow the U.S. economy and create jobs. But looking at NAFTA, one of the main reasons that we didn't see the growth in Mexican wages that was promised was because of a lot of the cracking down of unions there. That as the big maquiladora industries on the border and in other parts of Mexico grew, there were massive violations of labor rights. And so even as Mexican workers tried to organize and work for higher wages and other protections, they weren't allowed to. And we saw a lot of violence. We saw a lot of illegal union busting. And as I said, there's been no successful labor complaint ever brought as part of a free trade agreement.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So how do we stop it?
Well, fortunately, with the fight against Fast Track, which we all know we unfortunately lost, but a big benefit of that fight is we've created a global movement against these NAFTA-style neoliberal trade agreements. And so what we need to do is keep mobilizing and grow that movement. Because of the TPP touches on so many different issues, we can mobilize lots of different areas. People who are working on development because of the access to medicines, people who are, labor here in the United States because of the concern about wages, environmental groups because of the concern about increasing exports of natural gas, which would be required under the TPP, and other, along with the investor-state dispute settlement, which could allow corporations to attack environmental laws here in the United States and in other members' countries. So there's so many groups that we're bringing together. And it's going to really be, once again, a fight in Congress.
Yep.
That there's a possibility that they might conclude the negotiations soon, but I promise you we'll see big and very creative protests in Maui as the negotiations are going on this week. But really, once again, we're going to have to turn to Congress and really pressure our members of Congress to vote against this once it comes up for a vote.
Before I let you go, you said something there a second ago that I just want to clarify. You said that we would have to export our natural gas. Is that in that?
What it does is it requires, it gets rid of the restrictions on the export of natural gas from the United States to the TPP countries, which is why, again, a lot of the big environmental groups have been opposed to this, because they see that it could have a big impact on climate change.
It's those backdoor things you got to look out for. Catherine Johnson, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Catherine Johnson's a field organizer with Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. You want to check out their website? Just go to ricksmithshow.com, click on Catherine's name, take you right there. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. That was the day labor leader William Silvis died. Silvis was born in Armball, Pennsylvania. He learned the trade of wagon making from his father, but soon he left home to take up an apprenticeship as an iron worker. He found work in Philadelphia. At the time, there was an increasing practice of iron molders to hire unskilled workers as helpers for the skilled craftsmen. This led to skilled workers seeing their wages cut. Silvis joined a strike against the wage erosion led by the Journeyman, Stove, and Hollowware Molders Union. Soon, he was elected secretary of the union. But Silvis understood that to truly have power, the iron molders would need to organize beyond Philadelphia. And so in 1859, 12 molders from various unions met in Philadelphia to plan to join together. The Civil War put those plans on hold. During the war, as men went to fight, many workers saw their wages increase due to the labor shortage. But prices at the stores rose even more quickly, and it became harder and harder to make ends meet. Recognizing the need for labor to organize, in 1863, Silvis helped found the Iron Molders International Union. He became the first president of the new union. 21 locals joined under the Iron Molders International Union, and it grew to include 8,000 workers. But Silvis had a bigger vision for the labor movement. He thought all skilled trades should band together to improve wages and working conditions. So in 1866, he founded the National Labor Union. The National Labor Union quickly grew to 30,000 workers. But Silvis died in 1869, cutting short his efforts to grow a national union. The union continued until 1873, when it dissolved. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
The worldwide system of hotels that exists today began its development in Europe and New England during the 1800s. The early precursors of American hotels were the old inns of medieval Europe, and the word hotel is derived from the French word hotel, which meant a building that had frequent visitors. While the American colonies were developing, travelers could usually find rooms to sleep in taverns or small inns, much like today's bed and breakfast residences. It was rare for women to travel, so the norm was for local men and sporadic travelers to gather for drinks at taverns. It was clearly a place for male bonding, conversations, sipping ale, and occasionally political meetings. Nowhere were these more prolific than Boston. As the town grew, the taverns and inns began to add rooms for travelers and were referred to as lodging houses. Join us next time for the Parker House. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
We make Pennsylvania happen!
So let me ask you this. What do you think about having tractor trailers that are like 10 feet longer? What do you think with the idea of having, you ever see those twin trailers wiggling down the road? What would you say if each one of those were 5 feet longer for a total vehicle length of 10 feet longer? What would you think of that? Is that a good idea, bad idea? Would you like to pass one of those on the highway? Well, that's what's being proposed in Congress right now. Evidently, they are poised to pass legislation that's being attached to an appropriations bill that would allow these big trucking companies, to run what they call twin 33 trailers, or the double trailers, 33 feet long. Right now, there are 11 states that allow these, that you can pull the twin trailers of larger size. The 33s, I think Massachusetts is a state that allows you to pull twin 48s, but that's only on their turnpikes. Do you see that as maybe an option, or is it a bad idea? I know in Ohio, when I used to go back and forth, they allow triples of the 28-foot trailers to roll up and down their turnpike. And as they get off the turnpike, they have to go into a special yard and drop one of the trailers there. Is this a good thing? Well, our senator here in Pennsylvania says, I don't think so. I don't think it's a great idea. Bob Casey has said he's against the idea of allowing these bigger trucks on the roads. He says, I believe bigger trucks on the road means the potential of more accidents and increased danger for children and families. I agree on a big level there, but it's got to be much more than just we care about the children. Just kind of my thought. Understand, there's a lot to this. And the big part of it is our infrastructure is not prepared for it. They're also talking about, and I haven't seen it in the article, but I do know that there was talk of increasing the single trailers to a larger, I think California allows 58.5 foot trailers, or 59.5. So imagine those big 53-foot trailers. Imagine adding another 6 feet onto those trailers and trying to navigate through Philadelphia, or navigate through New York City or Boston, or any of these places that were built for horse and buggy. Imagine that. And imagine the damage and the destruction, and, well, the drivers getting screwed over it. And also, let's not forget, the reason that the FedExes of the world want it is cuts down on people. We don't need as many drivers. Now they're throwing it out going, well, environmental people, you should be in favor of this. In fact, we should be allowed to drive trains down the highway. We should be allowed to have not just double or triple 33s. We should have triple 53s. Imagine passing one of those on the road. They should be able to have just massive amounts of people, because we can alleviate workers and thus put more money in the pocket. So it's not surprising to me that the Pennsylvania Motor Truck Association is all in favor of the idea. It's not surprising to me that the Owner Operators Association, that they're in favor of it. I'm kind of just looking at this from a worker standpoint and a citizen's standpoint. At the end of the day, do you want to be trying to pass one of these behemoths? I mean, stop and think about it. I mean, you want to be on the highway, you want to be stuck next to one of these where maybe the guy can't see you, because I don't even know what the blind spots would be in a pair of twin 33s.
No, I hate passing trucks to begin with while I'm on the highway. It's just something you got to do sometimes. But I hate driving. I hate passing a truck, and I would really hate.
And that's why I was always told when you pass a truck, you do so with extreme prejudice. You don't just hang out next to it and putt. You go, you get by it. As someone who's driven a truck for years, nothing drives me crazier than that person who gets on your back axle and just sits there. They just sit there and either pass or don't, but get out of my blind spot.
And one of the things I know I would have a question about is, I was driving I-95 this weekend going into South Philadelphia. Road's absolutely horrible. It feels like it feels like you're driving
Horrible.
it feels like you're driving on the Outback with all the
like they
bumps.
bombed it. Yeah, it's like they bombed it. I mean, our roads have been bombed by capitalism.
And to me, like, what I want to know is this would probably make our roads a lot worse with all that added extra weight.
Well, they're not talking about increasing the weight.
Okay.
It's still 80,000 pounds, but 80,000 pounds is not good for your roads. Now, what they're actually trying to say is this will be better for our roads because there'll be less drivers. There'll be less trucks on the road. This way, there'll be less, so it'll be better. What it's really about is getting rid of the drivers, getting rid of the workers. But to me, there's a huge safety problem here. You could say, let's have 100-foot trailers, but how are you going to get them around? I mean, that's the thing. As someone who's actually driven one of these things, it's not as easy as just go.
I think in Philadelphia, there might be like only one place, and that's the Seafood District off of 2nd Street in South Philly, all the way down towards the tip of the river.
There's a bunch of places.
But other
Trucks
than
go
that,
everywhere, Sean. You think about the bed buggers who are driving your people's furniture and stuff around. You've got the moving companies who now have 60-foot trailers because, hey, we can fit 60 foot of stuff into this. Imagine him trying to get down into Philadelphia.
In Center City, Philadelphia.
Exactly. It's not going to happen.
No, it would be a spectacle that you might as well just put the car in park and turn off the ignition and wait for them to get done.
It'd be one of those YouTube videos that I laugh at because you have truck driver fails, which are hysterical. One of my favorite ones is the guy pulls up to a short bridge and realizes, not going to make it, then tries to turn around and just trashes the tractor because the trailer is 53 foot long and the road, you can't do a 3-point turn with a 53-foot trailer. And he literally got himself stuck between two walls. It was fabulous. But you should have known that from the beginning. You should have been better trained. And my problem is, especially when you're talking about the lack of training for a lot of drivers. Now they go, you want a house and a job, 2-week training, you're a truck driver, go. And
it's like Teach for America for truckers.
There you go. Wow, they did
Truck
that.
for America.
There you go. I'm against it. I've been against it for a long time. We talked about this several weeks back. I'm still against it, but good on Bob Casey for his vote. And I suggest while you're yelling at him and saying, no, TBP, say good job on the vote against the bigger tractors, bigger trailers. Just my thought. Let's take a quick break. Right back with the news. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Thought-provoking, intelligent conversation with a heart. The voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
I'm still not sure of all the causes and all the science.
Ohio Governor John Kasich jumps into the 2016 race. We'll try to decipher his position on climate change.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change.
The Democratic presidential candidate Martin O'Malley links global warming to Middle East unrest and ISIS.
If he is saying that, then my use of aerosol hairspray is as bad as beheadings.
And Fox News heads explode. Plus,
right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia.
California Governor Jerry Brown slams climate science deniers.
All of those slams and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment.
No, we should worship a great, big, huge, invisible, bearded, floating guy in the sky. Like you, Governor. That makes much more sense. Am I right? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I suspect you may be breathing a sigh of relief. We have maybe, just maybe, the final major presidential candidate to enter the race this week, which means your yeoman's job of tracking each of their climate change positions over these past many months is almost over.
There are probably a few more that are going to pop up anyway. They're like whack-a-mole.
All right, well, you just keep whacking. What do you have for us today?
Well, first, the 16th Republican has now jumped into the race for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination. Ohio Governor John Kasich announced his bid on Tuesday. Now, as we've said, we've been tracking the climate change positions of all of the official 2016 candidates. And in an interview with the Financial Times just 2 weeks ago, Kasich said he believes climate change is happening, but he's not sure it's time to do anything about it.
We have an obligation to the environment. Of course, we've got to be concerned about it, but we shouldn't worship the environment. And I wouldn't want to create any kind of dramatic economic change of policy, because I'm still not sure, I don't know that anybody is fully sure of all the causes and all the science.
Oh, man. All right, let's unpack that. First, nobody's worshiping the environment. What we're trying to say is, let's keep the planet alive. That's all it is. And the idea that, yeah, we may have to spend a lot of money to save ourselves, given that we have spent so much more money essentially killing ourselves over the past 50, 100 years. And yes, people do know who is responsible. It is man.
And in more recent history, in practice as governor, Kasich rejected federal funding for high-speed rail and rolled back Ohio's wildly successful renewable electricity standard, which had saved Ohioans over $200 million and lowered their electricity rates.
So is it fair to say that John Kasich both pretends to not be a denier and pretends to be a denier?
All at the same time. It's quite a trick.
He's very good.
Right-wing media was in an uproar this week after Democratic presidential candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley linked historic mega drought in the Middle East to unrest in the region.
One of the things that preceded the failure of the nation-state of Syria and the rise of ISIS was the effect of climate change and the mega drought that affected that region, wiped out farmers, drove people to cities, created a humanitarian crisis that created the conditions of extreme poverty that has led now to the rise of ISIL and this extreme violence.
Heads exploded in right-wing media land, figuratively, of course. Here's Fox News host Kennedy.
Oh, that's it. It's the mega drought. Finally, we know. I guess when you mix a rise in temperature with a lack of water, you get an Islamic caliphate.
Of course, don't tell Fox News, but the Pentagon calls global warming a threat multiplier, and multiple studies have found climate change worsened the 2011 drought in Syria and played a role in triggering Syria's civil war.
And we have covered that time and time again on the Green News Report. So I guess they just can't be bothered to do actual research over at Fox News.
Meanwhile, California Governor Jerry Brown blasted the climate change denial industry and their friends in politics and the media for obstructing action on climate change at a two-day climate summit at the Vatican in Rome this week.
We are talking about extinction. We're talking about climate regimes that have not been seen for tens of millions of years, that requires that we react. Right in the middle of this problem, we have fierce opposition and blind inertia. And that opposition is well financed.
And former California governor and action movie star Arnold Schwarzenegger also warned the conference, quote, "I've starred in a lot of science fiction movies, and let me tell you something, climate change is not science fiction."
And that's the guy who used to drive his Hummer around proudly as a denier. People can change. Only question is, will they do it before it's too late? For much more on that story and all of the others we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget, you can download the Green News Report anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, or iTunes from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
When it's time to change, then it's time to change. Nobody tried, come along for the ride, don't you see? When it's time to change.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you. When it's going down, before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving,
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
So Brian sent me an email reminding me that while the Donald may be a union member and have carried a union card, so was Ronald Reagan. And you are correct, sir. And probably one of the worst union members. The big union buster himself, Sir Sainted Ronald Reagan. One of his first official acts as president was to fire the shot heard around the boardroom by firing the PATCO workers and the air traffic controllers, and then making it that they could never be hired by a federal agency ever again. So it's not just that we fired you; it's that we're gonna fire you for life. That to me, again, one of those moments in history that we should remember. But thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Let's find out what's going on around the rest of the world. I've got Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, great to be here. Yeah, wasn't Reagan the president of the Screen Actors Guild?
Yes, he was. Thank you for that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Thank you for the punishment.
I'm sorry.
But no, I mean, the reality is look, when it was good for him, it was good for him. The heck for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, he was, as I recall, a pretty, forceful voice within SAG. So, it's kind of funny how it works that way. I guess
What's interesting is if you've ever heard James Garner talk about it, the guy who played Rockford for years, and he was in the Wild Wild West and a whole bunch of stuff, the movie. You hear him talk about Reagan as president because James Garner was the vice president of that union. He said, he was an idiot. And had no sense of how to administer anything and no leadership skills whatsoever. Yet because of his popularity, he won the president of the Screen Actors Guild, and then obviously came on to be president of the U.S. And still, I would argue, an idiot who couldn't administer anything.
Oh man, yeah, it's weird how he totally turned it around and became a great administrator in his time as president. Except for the whole Oliver North thing.
The whole Iran-Contra and the 200
thing.
people in his administration being convicted of felonies and all of that. That's fine. Never mind.
Yeah, but he had no knowledge of it. It's fine.
The one thing I did agree with him on, jelly beans. I love the little tiny Jelly Belly beans.
Yeah. Now, do you know that he actually had Jelly Belly produce blue ones for the first time for his inauguration?
Yeah, I do. And that's one of the things I agree with him on. Like the one thing I agreed with H.W. Bush on was his disdain for broccoli.
Yeah.
So we can find common ground with even people that we disdain.
There we go. Anything for GW?
Give me a second. I'll think of
Yeah, I want
something.
to see. Yeah.
His love of beer, I guess.
Before his presidency, yeah. Although he did drink again towards the end.
I like baseball. I like baseball.
Yeah, no, that's true. There we go. That's a good one.
All right, so we'll go with baseball. Painting. I don't know. I don't actually know. And now you've stumped me. Thanks for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, no, baseball's a good one. It was his dream to be baseball administrator and
commissioner. He wanted to be the commish.
Right. Yeah. Something I guess he never got the chance to.
And I would have been in favor of that. We could have put him as that, and we wouldn't have ruined we'd have just ruined baseball. We wouldn't have ruined the country.
I mean, we should have got him in 2002. To take him there. He obviously was off to sort of a rough start. And I'm sure he would have been just fine.
There you go. Let's talk about the presidential election. The Trump, I can't tell you how many people have emailed me and said, I can't believe Trump's still the head guy, especially after the McCain stuff. And I'm going, no, he's going to be the head guy for a while because he's saying what the crazy base wants.
I know. It's ridiculous. You kind of grow up wanting to be a pundit. You read all these books about politics. You obsess over all the political kind of minutiae and the trivia and all that stuff. And then Donald Trump comes along and shows that you actually don't know anything, and it's absolutely kind of terrible and disheartening. And it's frustrating. The media spoke in one clear voice last week, saying essentially that Donald Trump was at the beginning of the end with the McCain remarks, that this is something that he wasn't going to be able to get back from, that veterans were going to be, pushing against him in huge numbers. And lo and behold, he's not just still around, but continues to do incredibly well. We had a CNN ORC poll putting him at the top of the Republican Party. And then today we had an NBC Marist poll that has him in the lead in New Hampshire and within 2 points within the margin of error of Scott Walker in Iowa. So, pretty troubling stuff to say the least. And it really just goes to show that, with somebody like him who has name recognition and his own level of funding, the rules just don't apply to him, which is something I'm sure he's been long accustomed to as a CEO. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling.
I'll say it now. I want him to be the Republican nominee, and not just because I think a Democrat could beat him, just because if he does win, at least it will be an interesting 4 years of his administration. Because I don't think he would change his campaign style into his presidency style. I think he would get even more arrogant and more obnoxious, to where maybe at some point we start looking at each other and going, let's all unite against him.
Yeah, no, that would be pretty interesting, and I'm sure it would probably cripple the Republican Party for years. And as much as I'd like to see, that in practice, I'm beginning a little bit scared that he's not going to go away.
He's not.
I'm beginning to kind of get that feeling like, what if he wins?
Yeah, I mean, he's not going away. I've had a couple people go, "Oh, he's just in it." No, he's in it to win. What he understands is immortality. To him, this isn't a little ego boost. This is immortality. Being the 45th president of this nation, immortality.
Yeah, no, and easily the classiest and most luxurious president we'll ever have in our life.
Yeah, I mean, a robber baron president.
Oh man, it's been a while.
Yeah,
no, this is interesting.
We've never had a robber baron president. They've had a bunch of people that they've handpicked, but this is the first time the robber baron class, a member has stepped forward and put themselves into it. I mean, this is historical.
No, it certainly is. The fact is, getting the kind of play it is, and we've had presidents who've been rough around the edges and whatnot. We've had obviously LBJ, but nobody who's been this outspoken and this clear on the public main stage about how vulgar and ridiculous they can be.
Yeah, and what it's doing is it's making the rest of the Republican Party go with them. I look at the statement by Huckabee that Obama's marching the Israelis to the oven door. I'm going, that was planned. Someone wrote that line for him. He didn't just make that up on the scene.
Oh no, absolutely. And frankly, this is what's happening with the Fox News idea that you have to be within the top 10 in order to qualify for debates. The candidates are clearly seeing this and are, as a response, obviously upping their behavior, taking a page from the Donald Trump playbook in order to try to get some last-minute attention to qualify for that. That's something we've seen with Lindsey Graham's sort of weird internet videos that he's put out lately. Something, of course, we've seen with Chris Christie, upping his attitude and going after people on the campaign trail. And Huckabee, of course, who has, been hit pretty hard for this.
I mean, we're really turning this into a reality TV series.
No, that's exactly what's happening, and it's the sort of sense now that it pays off to be pretty much a bad actor. We had the RNC, we had Fox News trying to essentially, kind of save some dignity for the Republican Party by having the campaign season sort of moved up a little bit by trying to limit the sort of infighting we saw last time. But it certainly backfired, and it's created sort of a system now where bad behavior is clearly paying off. And it's really just bringing out the worst and a lot of, people who didn't really have much sense to begin with.
I mean, and the thing that gets me is, what does that say about us, the electorate? What does it say about us as the voters that we respond positively to insanity?
Well, it doesn't say much about us, the voters. It says a lot about Republican primary voters. And, those who vote in the Republican any primary election typically are those who, are the most dedicated to their ideology. They're the people who are really, the true believers at the end of the day. And I think this says a lot about, the small percentage of Americans who consider themselves primary voters, or likely primary voters, more so than the American people at large.
Did you see the Politico article this morning of the Trump supporter in New Hampshire, who evidently wasn't really a Trump supporter? He was just kind of like, I'm his guy here in New Hampshire, but not 100%.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that is, obviously pretty interesting. There's the sort of sense that a lot of people who are probably supporting him or naming him in polls and whatnot are people who probably aren't very involved in the political process and have a, lingering understanding of him, since he has pretty good name recognition, since he's sort of a shorthand for a lot of Americans on what it means to be successful. And that's probably fueling a lot of this. This only really becomes a real threat if those people who have been sort of disengaged, decide to have this to be the issue that they go to the polls over.
Either that or they're all on the payroll.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. He's paying a lot of money. He's paying, or poaching rather, a lot of, people from the Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity, I believe, to, help out his campaign. He hasn't really released how much he's paying his staff yet. But you have to believe for the people who have sort of left Washington to join the campaign that are pretty serious people in the political realm and are essentially creating or committing career suicide with this. You have to imagine that he's probably paying them a pretty good amount of money.
Is it career suicide, do you think? I mean, to go work for his campaign, or do you think it would be one of those things I just couldn't pass up because it was so insane? I wanted to be a part of insanity.
I think people in general will understand the money argument more so than you just want to see the insanity and you just want a front hand ticket to the world burning. But a lot of these people who I'm sure are joining him are going to probably face repercussions for this. This is a campaign that the Republican Party is not going to, forget as time goes down the road. This is something that's going to be, sticking in the cross for quite some time. And I feel pretty confident saying it probably is considered career suicide.
All right, so they're not
That being
Democrat.
said, if you paid me enough, I'd absolutely do it in a heartbeat.
but you would be, I would consider somewhat a Democratic operative. And I was going to ask, are these Democratic operatives who are jumping on this campaign to kind of help push him forward in the Republican primary?
Oh my God, I didn't think about that. I mean, from what I understand, these are people who are Koch brother people, but
okay,
I'm sure as this develops, there's probably going to be some Democrats who have a vested interest in ensuring Mr. Trump's rise. Frankly, if you were to imagine a scenario where a high-profile candidate was to run a campaign in order to trash and ruin a party, it would probably look exactly like the Trump campaign that we're seeing. Somebody's going out and just really destroying these sort of Republican leaders of the day, calling them, dum-dums in his advanced parlance and whatnot, and just really going after and tearing down. And this is something that is doing a lot of benefit to the Democratic Party. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on the left who don't want to see him leave anytime soon.
I don't want to see him go. He's comic genius. It gives me something to talk about every day.
I know we've gotten so lazy. It's great.
It is. And that's it. That's exactly it. And finally, I guess the Senate passed a highway bill. I guess that happened yesterday, right?
Yeah. The Senate passed a highway bill, and in connection to that, they also passed legislation that would increase the lifeline for the EXIM Bank. And then today we got the news that the House is not going to be going with this. What they're saying is that they are disagreeing with how the Senate version of the bill is written, saying it doesn't ensure funding for 6 years and only 3. And instead are saying that they're essentially going to be taking their ball and going home at August 1st at the recess, and instead are urging their colleagues to vote for a 5-month paid-for extension, and so kind of kick the can down the road there a little bit, and then revisit it later once the recess is over, which is sort of a new again in Washington how things are done.
Yeah.
These little piecemeal measures, and doesn't really build a lot of confidence in the ability to ensure that highway funds are carried out for quite some time. And it also will probably spell doom for the EXIM Bank, which has been called crony capitalism and whatnot, but has been a pretty effective tool for a lot of small businesses.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's about that certainty that the Republicans love to throw out there. We want to give business the certainty that they're actually doing their jobs. Nice job, guys.
Yep. There we go. But yeah, so 5 months, and we're not even sure if we're going to see any agreement on that. So there could be a situation where highway funds could expire, and a lot of people will just be sort of out of luck.
Nice. So when they shut down these highway plans, can I then run over the orange cones?
Oh God, no! Those are there for a reason.
All right. Well, I mean, there's nobody there. They're going to shut everything down. I should be able to.
No.
All righty. Well, thanks so much.
I'm used to, sir.
Good deal. All right, Justin. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks for the great news.
Thank you, Rick. You have a good one.
Always good talking to the Justin Duckham Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
By a 1-vote margin, the U.S. Senate passed fast-track authority to expedite passage of the disastrous Trans-Pacific Partnership deal, which will export beaucoup more of our country's middle-class jobs. That's the kind of pro-corporate stupidity the Republican Congress specializes in these days. But wait, the key votes for the fast track came from a baker's dozen of Senate Democrats. Fast track is a railroad job to enthrone global corporate power over us. It will allow the Obama administration to send the massive 12-country trade scam to Congress for an up or down vote with little debate and no amendments allowed. Details of this thing are being negotiated in strict secrecy between top government officials and top executives of some 500 global corporations. Workers, consumers, and all the rest of us are shut out. The majority of Americans oppose this giveaway, so what's with the 13 turncoat Democrats? Not to worry, they say, trade benefits everyone. Do they think we have sucker wrappers around our heads? Americans know that these trade schemes make the super rich richer, while the incomes of practically everyone else go south. There's still a chance to defeat the TPP because a gritty, well-organized populist coalition is rallying grassroots opposition to reject this raw deal. To join the fight, go to citizen.org/trade. This is Jim Hightower saying, and don't forget the 13 Democratic sellouts. If any one of them had stood with the people on the fast-track vote, we would have already derailed TPP. The 13 senators who said nuts to you are Michael Bennet, Maria Cantwell, Tom Carper, Chris Coons, Dianne Feinstein, Heidi Heitkamp, Tim Kaine, Claire McCaskill, Patty Murray, Bill Nelson, Jean Shaheen, Mark Warner, and Ron Wyden.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
At the animals, trap, 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 till the cages fall. The cages fall, stay awake in the dark, count mistakes. The light was off.
Sanity for a change. The Rick Smith Show.
The day's new, and everyone is waiting, waiting on you, and you got time.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Before we get to all that, thanks for being here. It was a great show today. Enjoyed the conversation on the TPP. Want to highlight, got to go back, start hammering on your representatives. I still remember my favorite response to voting in support of Fast Track was Bill Schuster. So I highly suggest calling Congressman Schuster and saying, you know what, now is time for you to hold up to your word and hold the president accountable to all 150 points that you said were part of your reasoning for voting for it. Because we were going to restrain the president was his justification. Think about this for a second. We're going to give the president all of the control to negotiate it, and then he'll drop it on our desk, but it's got to meet 150 points of our whatever plan it is. No, not buying it. But look, you got to call, you got to say no. Bad trade deal. Negotiate something that is going to raise wages in both sides of the borders, all of us together. Maybe think of a way to maybe recoup some of that $32 trillion that the Guardian pointed out we have given up to our wealth class. As much as $32 trillion. Think about that for a second. By allowing these billionaires, the Donald Trumps of the world, to just basically hoard cash overseas and then to hold us hostage over bringing it back. I mean, this is the second time now that I remember this huge amount of money sitting offshore. And the wealth class saying, well, we'll bring it back if you incentivize it for us. Give us a huge tax break. And we'll bring it back and maybe we'll consider doing something with it. Like we did last time. We divvied up amongst our friends, and then we bought back shares to the big companies, pumped up the price of the shares. The CEOs got really rich. The investor class got really rich. And then we laid off about 160,000 people nationwide. Success. And I guess it all depends on what your definition of success is. And this is where you've got to go, which side of this equation are we on? Are we on the side of the 1%, 2%, 5% who control the wealth in this country? Or are we on the side of the people who actually have to get their hands dirty and they have to go to work and punch a clock every day to make ends meet? To where after the 2 weeks they get a paycheck, or at the end of the week they get a paycheck that increasingly is less and less and less able to fund and to pay for the things that folks need. Those are the questions we got to ask. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me here, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. As I said, next week, Education Week, starting Monday all the way through. We're going to talk to teachers. We're going to talk to educators. We're going to talk about education issues. It's going to be phenomenal. And while that's going on, we'll be starting our People's Tour for America. Love to hear your thoughts, comments. What do you think we should be focusing on as we move across the South? Thanks for being here. Have a great night, and we will see you back here, right here, tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.